In a world where a person's magical talent is determined by their crest, more wings mean greater power. And this boy possesses a 7-winged crest, a strength rivaling the gods themselves. But because of that very power-greedy foes ruthlessly hunted him when he was just a newborn. He had to crawl through freezing snow-covered mountains just to survive until fortune smiled on him, and he was saved and adopted by a family. For the first time, Aster thought he had a real, loving family, but he was dead wrong. Back then, amidst a freezing battlefield littered with corpses, Roderick was shocked to see Aster show up. He demanded, "I put you in command of the army suppressing the East. Why are you here?" Aster replied with dead silence before coldly declaring, "To kill you." He knew right from the start that Roderick only wanted to use his unit as bait, discarding them the moment they lost their value. Since that man chose to be so heartless, he shouldn't blame Aster for showing no mercy. Staring at his adoptive father, Aster cried out in agony, "Father!" But Roderick only sneered in contempt. "That is the fate of the wingless, isn't it, my foolish son?" That was Aster, a Elmum, a member of the Elmum clan, the most renowned martial family on the continent, sworn to protect the royalty with their swords, and their patriarch Roderick, the only one in this kingdom possessing 7-winged power, had once on a whim saved Aster's life when he was freezing to death in a blizzard. To repay that debt, Aster risked his life doing everything Roderick demanded, turning himself into a true warrior. Yet that devotion didn't earn him any respect in the clan. Dallas and his other siblings constantly mocked him, saying, "Aster, don't get ahead of yourself. You are nothing but a wingless nobody in this world." A wing crest was proof of mana. The more wings, the stronger the magic. Yet Aster was the only one in the clan who couldn't use magic, despite being despised. He still trained tirelessly with his sword, believing that one day his loyalty would be rewarded and he would force those who looked down on him to open their eyes and learn some respect. But amidst the blinding snow, Aster realized with horror that he had fallen into a trap with no escape. Watching the figures slowly surround him, he gasped, "Why? An ambush!" Directing a choked, devastated gaze toward the adoptive father he had once deeply respected, he screamed in agony, "Father, I trusted you and followed you for all these years. All those years, and this is your answer." But all his devotion was met with Roderick's cold, mocking stare, as the patriarch casually spat out cruel words, "A mere tool has no right to expectations. Your role is finished, now get lost." Unable to accept this brutal reality, Aster lunged forward with his sword raised, screaming in bitter regret, "I was a fool to ever trust you, to ever—" But Roderick only sneered with ruthless coldness, "What a pathetic wretch!" With a single casual blow, he sent Aster flying, leaving him gravely wounded. Yet the cruelty of his so-called family was far from over. Roderick flashed a murderous smile while the others instantly threw glowing red magic chains binding Aster tightly. And just like that, unable to fight back, they slaughtered him. Standing over his dying body, a clan member mocked him, "Still don't get it, do you, dear brother-in-law? A wingless loser will always be a wingless loser. Crawling on the ground like a dog suits you perfectly." In his dying breath, Aster used the last of his strength to ask about the fake savior act from years ago. "If you planned on discarding me, then why did you save me in the first place?" Roderick knelt down, looking at his adoptive son with lifeless eyes, and coldly declared, "Don't flatter yourself. I never needed you." Roderick grabbed Aster by his hair and coldly revealed the brutal truth. "What I needed was the 7-winged power sealed inside you." Gritting his teeth through the blinding pain, Aster gasped in shock. 7 wings. He poured salt into the wound, adding, "Your mother was quite useful. She bore the seed that served my purpose." With that, he turned away, abandoning Aster. Dying in a pool of blood on the freezing snow, Aster feebly reached out toward that retreating back. "Wait, what are you talking about?" He screamed in despair. "Answer me, Roderick!" But his consciousness was fading fast. A bone-chilling cold invaded his body, leaving him to whisper feebly, "It's so cold. To die like this is so unfair. How can I ever swallow this bitter resentment?" As his eyes grew cloudy, Aster wondered bitterly, "Is this where I die? If so, what was the point of my life?" Suddenly, amidst the endless white void, a faint warmth enveloped him. Stunned, he asked himself, "Is this the afterlife?" Only to feel real snowflakes falling on his face. He gasped, "Snow! No! This is real!" Aster jolted awake, realizing he was still lying in the snow, but in a completely different body. Staring at his tiny hands, he wondered in shock, "Where am I? Is this tiny body really mine?" Realizing he was in the form of a newborn, Aster told himself in disbelief, "No! This is a baby's body." He was lying in the cold arms of a woman who had just drawn her last breath in the white snow. Have I regressed? From the distance, the thunder of horse hooves and the bright glow of torches pierced the night. A squad of soldiers yelled orders, "Search everywhere! Find that woman at all costs!" The commander urged his men, "For the honor of Lord Roderick, find the child she kidnapped." Hearing that familiar name, Aster froze his mind, racing. They just said, "Lord Roderick. Is he searching for me? Is the child me?" Suddenly he recalled the old stories of how he had been abandoned in a blizzard long ago. The shocking truth left him completely stunned. No, it can't be. Have I really gone back to the past? Crazy as it was, Aster knew he had to act immediately. Looking at the woman's lifeless body beside him, he resolved, "If I stay here, I'll fall right back into that Duke's hands. I have to escape. As far away as possible." Gathering his meager strength, the newborn baby began to painfully crawl across the freezing snow, desperate to escape. But the bone-chilling cold and his fragile body made, "Damn it!" Aster was utterly exhausted, barely able to breathe. His limbs felt like they were on fire. Though he had to crawl miserably through the pitch-black night, the burning desire for revenge still blazed in his amber eyes. Staring at his enemies retreating back, he gritted his teeth and swore a bitter oath in his mind. "Roderick, I swear I will survive. But right now he is so tiny. Just surviving on his own is hard enough, let alone getting revenge right." The long trail of his crawling across the snow finally ended when Aster's strength was completely spent. The next morning, a young girl found him clinging to life on the frozen ground. "Father, come here right now." Immediately, a noble-looking man approached. It was Viscount Hayfried. Beholding the sight of a child, a newborn lying all alone in the middle of a snowstorm, he couldn't help but gasp in shock. "What on earth is this?" Viscount Hayfried gently lifted the poor baby up, wondering in disbelief. "Why is there a baby in a place like this?" Looking at the child asleep in his arms, he froze. As he turned to look at the long trail stretching far across the snow, a flood of doubtful questions filled the Viscount's mind. Could a mere baby have traveled such a long distance? Who on earth is this child? The baby's extraordinary will to live deeply shocked and intrigued Hayfried. He cradled the tiny life close to his chest, using his warm cloak to shield him from the bone-chilling cold of the frozen wilderness. As Aster began to drift into a deep sleep, well, great, now he can rest easy and catch some more Z's, he found himself lost in an endless void. In utter confusion, Aster wondered, "Where am I?" Seeing the image of a newborn baby enveloped in light and feathers, he thought to himself, "This child." Suddenly, he was smacked right in the face and woke up. Opening his eyes, Aster saw a group of children crowding around him. A young girl squealed, "Big sister, the baby is awake." As tiny hands poked and prodded him, another girl warned, "Stop playing around. You're going to break his cute little nose." Finding all this incredibly annoying, he grumbled to himself, "What on earth is going on here?" Unable to take it anymore, Aster sprang up and bolted, leaving the children to cry out in shock. "Huh!" Aster ran frantically down the hallway, his mind a chaotic mess of pure panic. "Damn it! What is happening?" Behind him, the children were hot on his heels, screaming, "Hey! Stop right there!" Cornered and frustrated, Aster roared, "Why are you chasing me?" He unconsciously released a golden aura, and in an instant his body lost control of the mana, sending him shooting straight up into the air. Even he was utterly stunned. "But how do I get down now? I'm doomed." Fortunately, the Viscount quickly caught him in his arms. Otherwise, he would have been history. Looking at the baby in his arms, the man marveled, "I didn't expect you to fall from the sky this time. What a mysterious child." Meanwhile, Aster was stunned as he recognized the face in front of him. This man, Viscount Hayfried of the Lordrick territory. Aster couldn't help but wonder if this was a branch of the Elmheim family. Hayfried Elmheim was indeed the head of this branch, a branch of the prestigious Elmheim family. He, along with his younger brother Roderick, were once two warriors entrusted with the crucial duty of protecting the imperial family. However, in Aster's memories, this Viscount was supposed to have died a long time ago in a civil war that led to the downfall of the entire family. Seeing this deceased man now standing right in front of him, Aster was absolutely sure. "I've confirmed it. I really have returned to the past." How ironic. Right after escaping the mansion of that cruel duke, his life was saved by the duke's own older brother. A noble woman gently cradled Aster in her arms. She asked in surprise, "So this little one's magic went out of control and sent him flying like that?" Hyfryd nodded. "That's right. And here I thought he was just an ordinary newborn." Looking at the trembling baby, she gently comforted him. "You must have been so scared, right? You're safe now." She warmly embraced him. Honestly, why did he have to regress when he was this tiny? It does feel a bit off, doesn't it? While Aster was still in a daze, Hyfryd quietly observed him, realizing that this child possessed an immense power. He stepped closer, firmly pulled up Aster's sleeve, and stated, as they pulled up his clothes, they fell dead silent upon seeing the crest on the baby's back. The woman gasped in shock. "This is—" While the Viscount couldn't hide his utter astonishment. 7 wings. Staring at the glowing red crest, Aster wondered in shock. Why is this on my body? Painful memories from his past life suddenly rushed back like a nightmare, echoing Roderick's cruel declaration, "What I need is the power of the 7 wings that you possess." It turned out that from the very beginning his salvation was nothing but a ruthless conspiracy taking him in like a piece of cargo, just waiting for the day to strip away all his power. The horrifying truth filled Aster with boiling hatred. "So, he took me in just to steal these 7 wings. What do you mean, wingless? How dare you say that after you were the one who tore my wings apart?" Seeing the strange, shifting expression of the baby in her arms, Hyfryd's wife anxiously looked at her husband and asked, "So what do you plan to do with this child? Indeed, would he be just like his younger brother, trying to harm him as well?" Aster thought to himself, this is bad. Clenching his tiny fists with determination, he thought, "I can't let this power fall into the hands of the Elmheim family. I need it to get my revenge." Yet completely contrary to his fears, Viscount Hyfryd made a decisive choice. "Let's adopt him." Gently placing his hand on Aster's head, he comforted him. "This child is still just a fledgling that cannot fly on its own. Until its wings are fully grown and it can soar, I will take responsibility for raising him." In the middle of this solemn moment, the door suddenly burst open, sending the children who were eavesdropping outside tumbling into the room. Hyfryd calmly looked at his kids piled on top of each other and asked, "Did you all hear that clearly?" Looking at the children surrounding her, Viscount Hyfryd's wife let out a soft sigh. "Yes, I am also deeply worried about that child." Inside the cozy, warm room, an orange-haired little girl curiously tugged at her mother's hand and asked, "Mom, what's his name?" And just like that, the entire family was ready to welcome their newest member. "They're so kind, aren't they?" Looking down at the baby resting peacefully in her arms, the woman smiled gently and declared, "Aster, that shall be the name of the new star born into our family." The name was like a blessing for the future of this child, who possessed such striking amber gold eyes. 15 years quickly passed. The scene shifts to a magnificent grand castle where a row of servants stood neatly in formation, bowing respectfully as a familiar figure appeared. "We have been waiting for you, Viscount Hyfryd." Stepping through the doors was a poised young man with a long sword at his hip. This was Aster after 15 years of training. He gently reached out a hand to assist his older sister, reminding her, "Anfine, please watch your step." Anfine smiled radiantly and took her brother's hand with absolute trust. "Right, thank you, Aster." Their family was on their way to attend the Sword Dance Assembly, a grand annual event hosted by a ducal family under the Elmheim clan. This was not just a mere gathering for martial noble families to strengthen their bonds, but also a prime opportunity for each clan to showcase and size up the strength of the swordsmen representing their family names. Led by Hyfryd, Aster, and Anfine stepped into the main hall where a sea of gazes locked onto the young talents who were about to show off their skills. The elites certainly love flaunting their power, always throwing lavish parties and acting superior just because they have money. The arrival of the Viscount's party immediately drew a wave of malicious whispers. "Look, the Viscount's family is here. Have they come to make fools of themselves again? Haven't they learned their lesson?" Standing amidst the judging stares, Aster silently listened to the insults aimed at him. "Rumor has it they adopted a boy of unknown origin since they couldn't produce an heir of their own. I wonder how much more they're going to drag the Elmore family name through the mud." Seeing Aster stay silent under the glaring hostile gazes, Anfine anxiously tried to comfort him. "Don't pay them any mind." But the immense pressure from the powerful still weighed heavily on the shoulders of the weak. Viscount Hyfryd spoke in a low, stern voice. "In this place, anyone who shows weakness will be crushed." This is the current standing of our family. Leading Aster before the magnificent castle, the very place that had been his nightmare in his past life, he asked directly, "I wanted to show you this. Are you disappointed?" In stark contrast to his father's anxiety, Aster held his head high, his eyes flashing with pride. "Not at all, father. I'm fine with this cold reception." His bold response made Hyfryd burst into hearty laughter. "Hearing you say that puts my mind at ease." Staring into the depths of the castle, Aster thought to himself, "In my past life, I debuted in society as a disgrace to the Elmheim family. This place is filled with bitter memories, but I am different now." Returning with the 7-winged crest, he was back and stronger than ever. Up on the towering balcony, Dallas and the other arrogant nobles narrowed their eyes. As they watched the baby from back then, now fully grown, Aster could feel their hostile stares, but he didn't flinch. He walked proudly alongside his father and sister, a meticulous plan burning in his heart. His gaze, sharp as a blade, silently declared, "Now, first of all, let us make a dazzling debut in society together." In an era where knights ruled supreme, their power was defined by their mastery of the sword. It was the absolute pinnacle of swordsmanship, where the sharp strike of a blade drew the line between the strong and the weak. Prestige and immortal fame were the ultimate symbols that every swordsman yearned to reach. On the arena, brilliant blue mana erupted from the youth's hands, unleashing powerful slashes that left their opponents helpless, completely overwhelmed by sheer force. The ultimate physical manifestation of that power and prestige was none other than the crest. He stared at the glowing 2-wing symbol on the victor's hand. Watching quietly from the high balcony alongside his father and his sister Anfinn, Aster could feel the heavy, oppressive atmosphere of this place completely unchanged as always. Witnessing the tense, volatile atmosphere in the arena, he thought to himself, "No wonder Furin and Frey didn't want to come. Even a coward would shrink back from watching such a brutal clash." He recalled the memory of being humiliated by the high nobles in this very place. It still stung. Seeing Aster's silent, pensive expression, Anfinn called out to him worriedly, "Aster." Concerned about her younger brother's state of mind, she asked softly, "Are you shaking?" "I suppose it makes sense. After all, this is your first sword dance festival." Yet Aster only smirked, his eyes flashing with sharp contempt as he looked at the chaotic scene below. "Not really. I just feel a bit sick to my stomach, or rather, it's just plain disgusting, I count." Hyfryd announced that he had a meeting to attend and needed to step away, not forgetting to instruct Aster to keep a close eye on Anfinn. His older sister immediately protested, "Father, really, I'm a year older than Aster." But she was only met with a teasing look from her younger brother. "That's because you're way too clumsy, sis." Before leaving, Hyfryd patted Aster on the shoulder, advising him to take this opportunity to socialize and network with his peers. Leaning in close to his son's ear, he whispered a meaningful reminder, "Just make sure you don't reveal your 7 wings." Watching his father walk away, Aster thought to himself, "Easy for you to say." Sensing countless hostile, bloodshot glares locking onto him from behind, he scratched his head in annoyance. "But how? Am I supposed to socialize when the atmosphere is this thick with hostility? They're not even going to give me a chance. Dealing with these narrow-minded fools, I'd rather just go back home and take a nap." Suddenly, a cold light flashed in his eyes. Seeing Aster decisively walk away, Anfinn called out in a panic, "Aster, where are you going?" He only glanced back and gave a mysterious reply, "I'm off to make some friends." He then headed straight toward the waiting area, where the arrogant laughter of the nobles echoed endlessly. Spotting a stranger blocking his path, Dallas set his wine glass down in irritation and growled, "Who the hell are you?" Aster kept his calm smile and bowed. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Cousin Dallas. I am Aster F. Elmham, your cousin." He casually explained that he saw his cousin from afar and wanted to come over and say hello. Immediately, Ryan, who was sitting next to Dallas, spoke up mockingly, "He's just an adopted brat that the Viscount's family picked up." Hearing that, Dallas burst into a wild, maniacal laugh. Putting his hand to his forehead, he sneered, "No wonder. You really have some nerve using the letter F in your name." Looking at the faces of Dallas and Ryan, the 2 official heirs of the Elmham family, Aster coldly confirmed to himself, "These are the very bastards who directly attacked me in my past life. Even if you turn to ashes, I will still recognize you." Looking at the people in front of him, Aster thought to himself, how pathetic that back then I actually shivered in fear before people who now, in his eyes, are nothing but children putting on a show. "Go back. Enough with the greetings." Dallas quickly called Aster back. "Oh, Anfinn, you're here too." Seeing Anfinn trembling with fear, he continued mockingly, "Don't tell me you're still hiding behind your father. Why don't you come over here and serve us? This is an order from the main family. Anfin decisively stepped forward to protect her honor. I refuse. There is no master-servant relationship between the main family and the branch family. She then firmly grabbed his hand and pulled him away. But that guy still screamed behind them, "Hey, I'm not finished talking yet." He wore a twisted smile. "Don't you know? This girl's father is a knight so cowardly he couldn't even protect the king, and so he had to take the blame. And his own brother chopped his hand off." Dallas triumphantly delivered the final blow. "Thank goodness I don't carry the blood of a loser like you." Unable to hold it in any longer, Anfin screamed in frustration, "Take that back right now! Do not insult my father!" Instantly, Dallas splashed his glass of red wine right at her, coldly humiliating her. "How humiliating? Raising nothing but useless women who can't inherit the title. Your father must be so disappointed." "You absolute bastard. If it weren't for a woman, did you just crawl out of some hole in the ground? How dare he look down on her like that? If he were my kid, I'd beat him to a pulp." Looking at Anfin trembling in her soaked, elegant dress, Dallas sneered maliciously. "This isn't a ballroom, you know. Next time you should wear rags so you won't feel bad about getting drenched." Witnessing this scene, Aster quietly stepped closer, his eyes clouded in darkness. At this moment, only one thought remained in his head. "At first I was worried that I might have lost the feeling of rage upon seeing your faces. But fortunately, their sheer wickedness helped him reignite his fire of hatred." He casually grabbed a wine bottle from the guy next to him. Aster gently placed his hand on Anfin's shoulder to reassure her, then called out coldly, "Hey, Dallas." He tossed the wine bottle high into the air, catching everyone off guard. In a flash, his sword was unsheathed, and with a single slash, the wine exploded, splashing all over them. Drenched unexpectedly in wine, a shocked Dallas screamed, "What the?" His surrounding lackeys panicked, shouting, "Lord Dallas!" Amidst the chaos, Aster remained chillingly calm. He casually wiped a drop of wine from his lip, his eyes glowing with a threatening intensity. "Oh, it's just grape juice. It suits arrogant nobles like you perfectly, doesn't it?" Suddenly, the horrific memory from 3 years ago rushed back when Aster's power first exploded out of control. Amidst a blazing golden energy that consumed everything, a desperate cry echoed, "Stop it, Aster!" Witnessing the terrifying scene, young Furin hugged her fainting older sister, sobbing uncontrollably. "Are you trying to kill her? Snap out of it." Staring at that brilliant yet deadly aura, Viscount Highfield was utterly shocked. A 7-winged crest. I never imagined it held such dangerous power. He gripped the hilt of his sword worriedly, wondering whether a mere child could ever control such divine power. Because if he couldn't tame it, it would devour both Aster and everyone around him. This hidden power is like a wild beast that can't tell friend from foe if he attacks anyone he sees. That's going to be extremely dangerous, isn't it? Back to the present. Immediately after Aster's provocative, wine-splashing move, a soldier rushed frantically into the High Noble's meeting room and shouted, "My lord, something terrible has happened." Alfred, who was busy discussing important matters with Roderick, frowned in annoyance. "What is it?" "We are in the middle of an important meeting here," the soldier tremblingly reported. "It's the members of the main family and the Elmham branch family. Their 2 sons are currently in a duel." "What?" Both Alfred and Roderick were stunned by this shocking news. Without a second thought, the Viscount immediately rushed out to the main hall. The moment she saw her father, Anfin ran over in a panic, calling, "Father!" He hurriedly asked, "Anfin, what on earth is going on here?" She could only tremble as she pointed toward the chaotic crowd where Aster and Dallas were facing off intensely in the main hall. The crowd began to whisper and gossip about the rare brother-against-brother clash within the prestigious Elmham family. A bearded man with glowing red eyes sneered as he watched. "This sword dance festival is turning out to be quite entertaining." Dallas furiously channeled his mana, making his sword glow with a deadly crimson light. He laughed arrogantly, mocking Aster, "You're just a stray dog who knows nothing about the difference in our power." Instantly, the 4-winged crest glowed brightly on Dallas's hand, making the onlookers marvel at the superior class of a duke's disciple. He pointed his sword tip at Aster and challenged, "Now let me see your crest, or are you too ashamed to show it after seeing mine?" But despite that provocation, Aster kept a chillingly calm expression. He contemptuously replied, "Bragging about some useless patterns with pride is a pathetic joke I would never lower myself to do." Those words struck a nerve, making Dallas flush with rage, his eyes bulging wildly. Aster coldly laid down his terms. "More importantly, if I win, you must apologize to my sister Dallas." He sneered in agreement, but demanded a devastating price. "If I win, you will be my lapdog. I will work you to death." Without waiting another second, Dallas roared with murderous intent and lunged forward. He swung his sword in fierce slashes, determined to end his opponent right then and there. Yet Aster moved as gracefully as a ghost, easily parrying the powerful strikes. The sharp screech of clashing metal echoed through the hall as Aster calmly used his blade to block his enemy's deadly blow. To him, beating these little punks was absolute child's play. "Behold the power of the four-winged crest!" Dallas roared, swinging his magic-infused flaming sword at his opponent. His frenzied slashes unleashed a terrifying pressure, causing Anfan, standing above, could only shout in worry, "Aster!" Even though Dallas's swordsmanship was considered amateurish, the overwhelming magical energy from his four-winged crest made up for all those flaws. That was the absolute advantage of those who bore the crest, using pure magical power to crush any technique. If a one-wing mana was just a flickering candle in the wind, then the four-wing mana was as powerful as a devastating explosion. As Dallas attacked furiously, he mocked, "Where did all that cocky attitude go, huh? Didn't you want me to apologize? Or was that just empty talk?" He closed in, screaming for Aster to show his real power. Seeing this one-sided battle, the onlookers smugly believed the match was already decided. Aster coldly shot back, "You talk way too much." Instantly, he spun to deflect the attack and closed the distance in a flash, leaving Dallas to gasp in shock. "What? Have you learned some manners yet? Next time, talk less and do more." A golden wave of magic suddenly erupted, enveloping Aster's entire body. With overwhelming force, he declared in a low voice about his 15 years of grueling training in the Viscount's house. "It was all to wait for the day I could take revenge on those who trampled on me." Aster swung his sword, unleashing brilliant golden slashes ready to crush the enemy before him. Aster's brilliant golden mana erupted, backing Dallas into a corner and leaving him groaning, "Guh!" Witnessing this unbelievable sight, Rian, standing nearby, gasped in shock. "But, brother!" Dallas gnashed his teeth in fury. Unable to accept this harsh reality, he frantically questioned himself, "Am I being pushed back, but I have 4 wings?" In stark contrast to his panic, Aster maintained a cold face, his eyes glowing with an intense, overwhelming light, sending the crowd of nobles below into a panicked frenzy. No way. How could he win? They watched in utter shock as Dallas was completely overpowered, unable to stop themselves from trembling. Does Elmham still have monsters like this? While Aster was caught up in his fierce assault, Viscount Highfield, standing on the balcony, began to notice something was off. He muttered in worry, "This is bad." Dallas tried to resist in desperation, his face contorting under the terrifying magical pressure. Painful memories of betrayal and the mocking laughter of his enemies from his past life suddenly flooded back, burning Aster's mind with a blazing fire of hatred. His extreme fury caused his magic to surge as powerfully as a storm ready to crush the trembling figure before him. Faced with the deathly aura, Dallas could only weakly whimper, begging him to stop. Seeing things about to spiral out of control, Highfield panicked and screamed, "No, Aster!" With a thunderous crash, the match ended in utter disbelief. It turned out he had only struck the ground. Otherwise, that punk would have been dead by now. Still, that alone was enough to make him wet his pants. Aster coldly threw his own insult back at him. "Next time, remember to wear rags so you won't feel bad when you get soaked, cousin. A gentleman's revenge is never too late even after 15 years, haha." Aster held his head high and looked up at the balcony where Anfin was watching in worry. In his heart, he told himself, "I am no longer Aster the wingless nobody." The fresh sense of freedom and power made Aster's mind clearer than ever. But suddenly, a dense wave of murderous intent surged, causing his pupils to shrink. Aster jerked his head around, his breath catching as he felt a terrifying presence. Coming from the top of the stairs, it radiated a pressure so heavy the air felt frozen. It was Roderick. Aster gritted his teeth, his eyes burning with hatred as he came face to face with the monster who had ruined his life. After all these years, the devil had finally appeared before him. What should he do next? The entire audience held their breath in absolute shock. Whispers began to ripple through the arena. "Unbelievable. The youngest son of a branch family." Some of that Viscount actually defeated the 3rd son of the main family. But astonishment was quickly replaced by a creeping dread. One of the onlookers warned anxiously, "But now we're in deep trouble. He won't stay quiet after having his honor trampled like this." Aster walked away in silence, his sharp eyes casting a glance at Dallas, who was lying on the ground laughing like a madman, before shifting his gaze toward the towering figure standing at the top of the stairs. It was none other than Roderick the 8th Patriarch of the Elmham family, who was radiating a suffocating pressure. Aster didn't look away. Seeing his father arrive, Dallas clung to him like a lifeline, pathetically crawling along the ground. It's him! This piece of trash actually dared to defy our main family. Ugh, playing dirty, are we? Can't win the fight, so you run to tell an adult. You've got to take your losses like a man. He continued to use a despicable tone to fuel his father's rage. Father, please use your authority to teach him a lesson. But before he could even finish his sentence, Roderick decisively swung his sheathed sword, bringing down a lightning-fast strike onto his son's pleading hand, leaving behind a horrific scene. Dallas's agonizing screams echoed throughout the hall, leaving the crowd frozen in terror. Roderick looked down at his defeated son with absolute disgust. Why is a loser like you lying there grinning like that? Do you have any idea how much shame you've brought upon our family? He coldly declared to those who couldn't protect themselves. Witnessing Roderick's wild fury, Viscount Highfield panicked and shouted, "Stop, Roderick! Don't do this!" Ignoring the pleas to stop. Roderick roared, "You're not worthy of holding a sword," before swinging his greatsword, aiming to finish off his own flesh and blood. Just as the deadly blade was about to strike, Aster rushed forward like a flash of lightning. He stood directly in front of Roderick's blade, his eyes filled with unwavering resolve. Looking at his defeated cousin, who had still not apologized to his sister, Anfin Aster boldly addressed the patriarch. "Uncle, could you wait until he does that before punishing me? Uncle, even if he dies, he still needs to keep his promise first, hehe." Faced with the child's arrogant attitude, Roderick coldly sneered, "An orphan adopted by Hyfrid. Or so I've heard. Do you actually think you're a member of the House of Elmhem?" Unfazed, Aster stood his ground. "I am the Viscount's son. Though we don't share the same blood, the pride and responsibility of a knight, and the family are things I learned from my father." The air suddenly froze under Roderick's terrifying silence. Emanating a crimson aura of bloodlust, he growled, reminding Aster of the family hierarchy. "As a branch family member, you have tarnished the main family's name for no reason." Roderick proudly declared his own status as the king's sword, the absolute pinnacle of the 12,000 knights under his command. He sought to crush the young boy with his immense presence. Watching the situation escalate, the spectating nobles realized the gravity of it all. This was no longer just a simple squabble, or between kids. Roderick continued to use a painful past to threaten him. "Your father paid with an arm for his disloyalty." He pressed his sword down hard and demanded, "What about you? What are you planning to sacrifice?" Since he couldn't win an argument with a child, the old man resorted to throwing his weight around. How pathetic. Yet under that immense pressure, Aster remained unusually calm. He replied with unwavering resolve, "With all due respect, Uncle, this is not some pointless argument. This is an official duel. I am merely using my sword to answer the insults thrown at the Viscount's house." Aster's eyes flared. Looking directly at his enemy, he used Roderick's own philosophy against him. "Those who cannot avenge themselves are not worthy of holding a sword." "Weren't those your exact words, Uncle?" He firmly declared his iron will, "And I don't intend to sacrifice anything, not even a single finger." Meanwhile, Anfin was still trembling with anxiety. The onlookers couldn't help but gasp in shock upon learning Aster's real age. "He's 10 years old. You've got to be kidding me." Roderick just quietly stared at the boy before him, his bloodshot eyes full of mystery. "I see," Roderick coldly muttered before abruptly commanding, "Then get into position." Instantly, a terrifying pressure crashed down, catching Aster completely off guard. Roderick unleashed a slash at the speed of light, triggering an earth-shattering magical explosion, shattering the solid stone floor into 100 pieces. Was he really going all out against a mere child? Witnessing the horrific sight, Anfin could only cover her face and cry in despair. Viscount Hayfrid roared in pure fury, "Roderick!" and risked his life to leap into the battlefield. He swung his sword, stopping the patriarch's devastating attack in the nick of time. Sparks flew as the two brothers clashed, unleashing a suffocating pressure from the shockwave. Hayfrid shouted his son's name in sheer panic. "Aster, are you okay?" Amidst the thick dust and crumbling stone pillars, the young boy's silhouette gradually emerged. Despite being heavily injured with blood streaming down his face, Aster stood firm, sword in hand. His eyes burned with an unyielding will. His blood-stained face showed absolute hatred as he stared straight at his enemy. Roderick quietly watched the boy for a long moment, his face completely expressionless. Then he casually turned on his heel and walked away, leaving Dallas lying miserably on the ruined ground. Watching the patriarch's receding back, Aster's strength finally gave out, and he collapsed much to his father's panic. Caught completely off guard by a surprise attack, it was a miracle a 10-year-old like him didn't kick the bucket. Hyfryd anxiously caught his son's staggering body and cried out, "Aster!" Despite his blood-stained face, the boy smiled in satisfaction and whispered, "I protected Sister Father." "My promise and everything." Looking at his resilient child, Hyfryd choked back tears and replied, "Yes, you did a wonderful job, son." Meanwhile, Roderick silently walked down the stairs, leaving Dallas slumped on the ground, miserably beneath the judging gazes of the onlookers above. Having witnessed the whole thing, a bearded noble spoke up mockingly, "That was a rather childish stunt you pulled, Roderick." He reasoned that if Aster had been allowed to do as he pleased, the main family's honor would have been dragged through the mud. Thus, Roderick stepping in was a fair compromise. Looking toward the young boy who had just caused such a massive stir, he thought to himself that this was surely the most sensational debut in high society, daring to stand face-to-face against the Grand Duke himself. The accompanying noble trembled, breaking into a cold sweat, while the other man admitted his heart had nearly stopped from the fear that the illustrious Elmham family would be torn in two after this clash. Indeed, a children's fight almost tore the entire clan apart. Lost in thought, Roderick's eyes flashed crimson. He could sense a chaotic era approaching, a storm massive enough to tear the world to pieces. Down below, Anfinn rushed over in a panic to check on Aster's wounds while Hyfryd held him up. Despite his battered body, Aster still wore a bright smile in the warm embrace of his worried father and sister. Soon after, the clashing of wooden swords echoed across the training grounds as Aster easily knocked down his opponent with a single decisive blow. Splayed. Flat on the ground, the soldier could only gasp in admiration. That was truly impressive. Young Master Aster. The astounding progress of the 10-year-old youth became the hot topic of gossip among the surrounding soldiers. His skills are no joke. He's only 10. That's terrifying. They realized that ever since returning from the sword dance festival, Aster seemed to have become a completely different person, throwing himself into training with a terrifying drive. Rumors of him crushing Roderick's third son spread like wildfire, bringing immense satisfaction to the members of the Viscount's branch family. After years of being forced to swallow their pride by the main family, having someone finally slap them in the face like this was incredibly cathartic. It was pure bliss, Aster thought to himself. At the sword dance festival, I showed off enough strength and authority. At least that will shut up those who kept claiming the Viscount's branch is the shame of Elmham. However, his ambition did not stop there. Aster's true target was still the Elmham family itself, which was full of injustice. He frantically swung his sword, trying to push his limits even further to test his true power. His eyes gleamed with determination as he recalled his face-off with Roderick, admitting to himself that he had wanted to test his limits even further right then and there. Looking back at the wounds from their previous clash, Aster bitterly realized that with his current level, he still couldn't defeat Roderick. He understood clearly that the wing emblem was only a measure of magical potential. Real strength lay in how one unleashed it. Even if he possessed the legendary 7 wings, if he couldn't control that torrent of mana, it would be nothing but a waste of his innate potential. Aster poured all his strength into a powerful swing, secretly wishing he could test his 7 wings to their limit without worrying about them erupting out of control. But all in good time. He was only 10 years old after all. Brandishing his wooden sword, he roared with fierce pride, "Who's next?" Witnessing that chaotic scene, Anfinn let out a weary sigh. "Here we go again. Our Aster just never knows how to hold back. Honestly, it's unbelievable." She walked over and informed him, "By the way, Father is calling for you." Hearing this, Aster immediately lowered his sword and replied, "Father, I see, I'm on my way." Looking at his sister, Aster was surprised to see her in such neat training attire. He remarked, "Now this is a rare sight. Didn't you used to hate wearing this because you thought it was ugly?" Anfinn thoughtfully explained, "Everything needs balance, doesn't it? Watching you made me realize I can't just keep going on like this." Suddenly, she pointed her wooden sword straight at her brother's face with a challenging smile. "So when you get back, you'd better make plenty of time for me." At his sister's playful demands, Aster could only laugh and wave his hands. "Ha ha! Please spare me!" He left the training ground, which was littered with defeated soldiers, and headed toward his father's study. Standing before the intricately carved wooden door, Aster knocked politely. "Excuse me?" Entering, he saw Viscount Hyfryd standing thoughtfully by the window and respectfully asked, "You wanted to see me, Father?" The Viscount turned around, his face dead serious. "Take a seat." Seeing his old man look this serious is actually pretty tense. Heh. Aster quietly sat down across from his father. Hyfryd looked at his adopted son thoughtfully and began, "It has been nearly 15 years since we welcomed you into our family. I wanted to wait until you were a bit older, but..." With that, he placed a small cushion on the table upon which lay a ring set with a brilliant glowing red gemstone. Stunned, Aster gasped, "This is—" Hyfrid looked straight into his eyes and declared firmly, "The proof of succession. Aster, I want you to inherit the Viscountcy." Viscount Hyfrid made his proposal without hesitation. This left Aster completely stunned. He explained that Aster himself knew how precarious their Viscounty's position was, and like it or not, they were still a branch bearing the Elmem name tasked with protecting their own territory, so they couldn't leave the position of successor vacant forever. Faced with this monumental decision, Aster anxiously asked, "Have my sisters agreed to this?" Hyfrid replied that once he entered the Knight Academy, he would meet them and officially break the news. Thinking of his sisters, especially Manhwa and Kudo, Aster knew they wouldn't be happy. In fact, Kudo would definitely fly into a rage. Hyfrid sighed and admitted, "She dislikes you simply because you're a boy who was lucky enough to get 7 wings. But when he was going through hell and back, did she even care?" Aster resolutely stood up and refused. "I cannot accept this." He admitted he was still too green, unable to even control his own magic, which had nearly caused an accident that would have harmed his own sister. Witnessing such unusual maturity in a 10-year-old, Hyfrid fell silent. "You always make me wonder if you are truly a child." He put away the succession ring in its box and opened another secret compartment. "I thought this ring would be your reward for the sword dance festival, but it seems you might prefer this instead." Aster gasped in shock. Resting inside was the real gift, the demonic sword Gram. It was a legendary blade capable of devouring mana, the only thing that could help him completely suppress the violent power of his 7 wings. Hyfrid led Aster to a secluded forest and nodded in satisfaction. "Very well, this spot will do." When Aster questioned why they couldn't just use the training hall, his father reminded him of the times he had gone overboard and smashed everything in sight, explaining the need for caution. He solemnly held out a sword still in its scabbard. "This magic sword, Gram, is an heirloom meant only for the eldest son of the Elmem Patriarch. I had it brought from the main estate just for you." Was he actually authorized to take it, or did he just snatch it? Hey! Aster was stunned to see that the legendary sword, Gram, actually had no blade, it was broken. Hyfrid explained, "This is a sword of potential. It only becomes complete when its master infuses it with mana." Having said that, he demonstrated by channeling his own mana, causing a bizarre glowing red blade to burst forth, radiating a terrifying pressure that left Aster horrified. The destructive power of Gram unleashed a terrifying slash, tearing the ground apart and obliterating the forest in front of them in the blink of an eye. Hyfrid gave a serious warning. "However, if your mana is mediocre, you might find yourself drained completely dry by the sword." He offered the hilt to his son and asked, "So do you want to give it a try, Aster?" Trembling, he reached out for it, his mind filled with doubt about channeling mana into such a dangerous ancient weapon. The moment his hand gripped the hilt, a brilliant golden aura suddenly exploded, enveloping Aster's entire body. He realized in shock that the mana inside him was being violently sucked into the sword on its own, completely out of his control. The massive surge of energy from Gram shot straight into the sky like a column of blinding light, drawing the attention and awe of onlookers watching from afar. It was a good thing his dad had anticipated this and brought him out here. Otherwise, the whole village would have been wiped out. A soldier asked in a panic, "Could that be a falling meteor?" But his comrade immediately brushed it off, since that light was clearly shooting from the ground up into the sky. Watching from a distance, Anfin couldn't help but feel anxious. What on earth is that? It was definitely because of Aster. Standing at the center of the magic explosion, Aster stared in awe at the weapon in his hand, thinking to himself that it was truly an extraordinary sword. But the Viscount. Hyfrid looked at his son with a serious gaze and asserted, "But what is truly extraordinary is your own power." He went on to explain that throughout the long history of the Elmem family, no one had ever possessed the legendary 7 Wings crest. Looking up at the energy swirling violently in the sky, Hyfrid declared with absolute confidence, "Once you master this power, you will far surpass even me, a bearer of the 6 Wings crest, and perhaps even Lord Roderick." Hearing the name of his enemy from his past life, Aster clenched his fists, burning with the determination to surpass that monster. Hyfrid continued to give a grim warning about the dark side of power, explaining that having too much strength always sows the seeds of conflict. He feared that if the secret of the 7 Wings was exposed, Aster would become the target of intense jealousy and envy. There would be those who would desperately try to use him as a tool, and no shortage of those who would want to destroy him, viewing him as a nuisance that needed to be eliminated. If you're weak, they look down on you, and if you're strong, they hate you. How true is that, guys? He looked at his adopted son with deep concern. Therefore, so you won't have to regret your own powerlessness when that moment comes, become strong while you still can. Aster looked at his father's outstretched hand. He firmly grasped it, resolving in his heart never to let himself live such a miserable life as he did in his past. Looking straight into Hayfried's eyes, he asserted, "Thank you, father. I will definitely master both the 7 wings and this sword." 3 days later, his 2 older sisters returned to the estate where the Viscountess and Alphonse were already waiting with bright smiles to welcome them home. As soon as they stepped inside, a girl with fiery orange hair and spirited green eyes announced loudly, "The useless Kuro is back." Walking beside her was a silver-haired girl with a much calmer and gentler demeanor. After a short, dry cough, the orange-haired girl, who was indeed Kuro, immediately beamed and spread her arms wide with excitement. "Come on, my lovely little sisters! Give your big sister a hug!" But in stark contrast to Kuro's enthusiasm, the 2 youngest sisters brushed past her like the wind and threw themselves into the silver-haired sister's arms, cheering, "Welcome home, Sister Marfa!" Heartlessly ignored, Kuro froze in shock. "Oh my gosh! What about a hug for Sister Kuro?" Watching this tragicomic scene from a distance, the Viscount Hayfried and his wife, along with Alphonse, could only look on with sympathetic eyes. Talk about some serious favoritism here, haha. To explain this cold treatment, one of the little sisters clung tightly to Marfa and mumbled, "But Sister Kuro always messes up my hair." Hearing this, Kuro immediately crossed her arms, looking offended as she tried to defend her image. "No way! How could someone who has fully embraced the spirit of knighthood like me ever behave so improperly?" Yet the moment she saw Alphonse Kuro's true nature flared up again. She rushed over, threw her arms around Alphonse, and pinched her cheeks excitedly. "Have you been a good girl while I was gone?" Suffocating from the tight hug, Alphonse could only gasp helplessly, "Why did you run over here?" Just as the little ones had said, Kuro's hands went straight to work, ruthlessly messing up Alphonse's pink hair. Noticing the absence of their newest family member, Marfa looked around and asked, "Where is Aster?" Standing next to his wife, the Viscount replied, "Ah, if you're looking for Aster." Hearing that name, Kuro's eyes suddenly narrowed. It seemed this older sister didn't have much of a liking for her adopted brother for some reason. Meanwhile, in a clearing deep in the forest, a bright red mana explosion had just swept through, leveling the surrounding trees. Aster was training like a madman, drenched in sweat and panting heavily. Huff. Huff. He grit his teeth in frustration as he felt a strange instability inside his body. "Damn it, this isn't good!" Staring at the demonic sword, Graham burning with energy in his hand, Aster muttered to himself, "I can manifest a sword with magic, but just keeping it under control is already pushing my limits." Even though he had unleashed a destructive force that cracked the ground, he still felt incredibly small compared to the goal ahead of him. "What must I do to become like Father?" Suddenly a sarcastic voice echoed from behind him. My, this is far beyond my expectations." Aster turned around in surprise to see his newly returned sister standing there, arms crossed, watching him. "Sister Kuro, you're back." Kuro strolled closer, a challenging smirk playing on her lips. "And here I thought you couldn't even be bothered to greet your big sister. Isn't that a bit cold?" She leaned in her eyes, searching Aster's face with intense scrutiny. "Or do you think you're so special now that you can just ignore us?" Kuro continued, her words laden with implication. "I heard about what happened at the sword dance assembly. The Knight Academy is buzzing with all kinds of rumors about you. Father must be so proud of you." This sister sure loved to tease her little brother with sharp questions, but Aster didn't hesitate to praise Kuro's own impressive accomplishments. Even as a mere apprentice, she had participated in countless dangerous missions, and was the only knight to receive an honorary medal this year. Kuro admitted that her hard work was solely to prove she was worthy of inheriting their father's legacy. Her eyes sharpened as she asked him directly, "I heard you turned down the offer to become the successor. Did you do that for my sake?" The abrupt question annoyed Aster as he realized their father had revealed the secret too early. He tried to explain that he simply didn't feel worthy yet, but Kuro refused to accept that excuse. She walked away coldly, stating that they both knew very well what each other's true dreams were, and that his rejection only made her feel patronized. Suddenly, Kuro swung her sword, unleashing a brilliant blue slash with terrifying force. easily splitting an ancient tree in two right before Aster's eyes. He dodged in shock, his eyes wide with astonishment at his sister's sudden attack. Aster shouted in panic. "Sister, what do you think you're doing?" "Exactly, sister." They were just having a conversation, and then she goes and scares the life out of him. Ha ha. Ignoring her brother's bewilderment, Kuro stood proudly amidst the dust, declaring that this would be a little test after their long time apart. She flashed an excited smile and warned, "Next, I'm going to attack for real." Aster started to panic as he tried to stop her, yelling, "Wait, Sister Alphen!" Deep down, he was incredibly anxious. The magic swordgram was still incomplete and extremely difficult to control. Kudria coldly reminded him that enemies on the battlefield would never accept excuses. She asserted that a knight's ultimate rule is to always be ready for combat in any situation. Without giving Aster a moment to compose himself, Kudria lunged at him like a whirlwind, her voice low and threatening. "If you keep this up, I might just crush you to pieces." Aster realized he was backed into a corner as all his long-standing efforts to suppress his magic power started to feel completely useless under this suffocating pressure. Seeing the genuine bloodlust in Kudria's eyes, Aster knew that if he didn't fight back, she would definitely kill him. With no other choice left, he decided to unleash all of his suppressed power. A surge of blood-red magic suddenly erupted from the sword, enveloping Aster's body with brutal force. The two surges of blue and red energy collided violently, triggering an earth-shattering explosion right in the middle of the forest. The terrifying magical blast blew everything away, tearing through a vast stretch of the dense woods. Kudria charged forward like a blazing red phantom, laughing with excitement. "Your swordsmanship is as sharp as ever. I didn't expect you to keep up with my strikes, especially since I've taken that technique to a whole new level at the Knight Academy." These two siblings are officially going head-to-head to see who is stronger. If their parents find out about this, they are both dead meat. Aster gritted his teeth, straining to defend himself, but Kudria kept pressing her relentless attack while mockingly adding, "But still, what on earth was that bizarre swordsmanship just now? Your magic control is an absolute mess." Blown back by the suffocating pressure, Aster's feet dragged across the ground, leaving long trenches in the dirt. He gasped for air, completely tense. "Sister Kudria Afka isn't holding back at all." Looking at his sister standing tall amidst the rising dust, Aster bitterly recalled the old days. In his memory, she had always been this way. Just because Aster was the only son with the right of inheritance, Kudria, a genius who possessed the family's most superior wing crest, had always seen him as a thorn in her side. To him, his older sister was like a violent storm, always finding any excuse to attack and force him into constant duels. She was truly his natural nemesis, someone he never wanted to face. The ground shook as the blue and red magical energies clashed head-on once more, creating a pillar of light that soared into the sky, tearing through the heavens. Kudria glared at her brother, her eyes flashing with murderous intent. She snarled, "Just look at you, Aster. You don't deserve to be the next head of this clan at all. This sister is seriously insulting him while beating him up." Man being the younger brother is rough. Standing by the window, watching the terrifying battle unfold outside, Manhwa couldn't help but ask her father anxiously, "Father, is it really okay to let them handle this on their own?" In the worst-case scenario, this sibling brawl could end with one of them dead. You know that, right? Contrasting his daughter's anxiety, Viscount Hyfrid calmly watched the duel and remarked, "In a way, and they are actually the perfect rivals for each other. It might look reckless, but it won't lead to a bloody tragedy." Despite her father's reassurance, Manhwa could only break into a cold sweat and hope things would turn out just as he said. Returning to the desk, Manhwa got straight to the point. "So why did you summon us back from the Knight Academy anyway, Father? It's definitely not just to talk about the inheritance, is it?" Hyfrey silently placed a letter with a red wax seal on the desk. It was an urgent summons from the Elmham family. In a low voice, he revealed the haunting truth. "It seems the elders in power at the main house want to see for themselves what their grandson is really made of. He has landed right in the family's crosshairs. Now, just surviving in peace is going to be the real challenge." Looking at the letter, Manhwa was shocked to realize the situation was far more serious than she had imagined. Hyfrey's face clouded over. He delivered a spine-chilling warning. "In the worst-case scenario, we might lose Aster." Meanwhile, in the forest, the clashing swords continued to unleash bursts of brilliant blue magic that ripped through the air. Straining to hold his ground, Aster shouted back in anger, "Stop talking nonsense. I already turned down the inheritance." "You heard me loud and clear, didn't you?" But his explanation only fueled Kudria's fury. She gritted her teeth, her eyes flashing with madness as she swung her sword. "And that is exactly what makes me so furious. Feeling a massive weight bearing down on his blade, Aster could only grit his teeth and groan in helplessness. "It's too heavy, damn it!" This scene of an older sister bullying her younger brother is all too familiar. It probably happens around us all the time, haha. Aster felt like he was facing off against a giant wild bull wielding a sledgehammer. The pressure from Kudria was suffocating. Even as he tried to get her to listen, Kudria only replied coldly, "You're just running away, aren't you?" Her strikes were so fast and powerful that Aster could only brace himself in agony. "Ugh! What kind of monstrous strength is this?" While overpowering him, Kudria continued her lecturing, claiming that someone who just swings his sword recklessly like him is merely third-rate. She asserted that only those who can control their magic can reach second-rate. And only those who master the path of the magic sword deserve to be first-rate. Looking down at her struggling brother, Kudria's face fell with disappointment. "You really disappoint me, Aster." She began to analyze the disparity between their wing crests, where a single wing of difference theoretically meant a threefold increase in both magic firepower and physical strength, according to the five-wing theory. Kudo was completely outmatched by Aster's 7 wings, yet in reality, he kept dodging direct clashes using a cowardly and clumsy style of swordplay, teaching her little brother while throwing insults. Yep, that could only be his beloved sister. Kudo pried deep into Aster's mind, asking if he simply didn't dare to believe in his own power, or if he was afraid of losing control, just like that accident 3 years ago. That question was like a splash of cold water, leaving Aster stunned as he questioned himself. "Afraid? Am I actually afraid of the power of my 7 wings?" Aster stared at the magic sword Graham, realizing that his long-standing instability was actually because he had been intentionally suppressing his own magic power. Across from him, Kudo roared in envy. "Aster, you hold the very thing I've been dreaming of for so long. If you're just going to let that God-given talent rot away without even realizing it, then I have every right to be arrogant, don't I? Give it all to me." She unleashed her full power, creating a terrifying magical explosion that engulfed Aster. But to Kudo's absolute shock, Aster stood his ground. "He actually blocked my full power strike." With glowing eyes, he smiled triumphantly. "Thank you so much, sister. Thanks to you, I've finally come to my senses." Without a single moment of hesitation, Aster charged straight ahead without even shaping his blade, leaving Kudo completely stunned by this reckless move. Now he actually knows how to strike back. Talk about a sister worth her weight in gold. Kudo suddenly sensed the magic power coming from that last attack. It was the endless energy hidden deep within the 7-wing crest. Although he couldn't fully control it yet, in this life-or-death moment, Aster concentrated all his magic power right into the exact moment of impact. Instead of maintaining the blade's shape, this bold tactic made Kudo marvel silently. "So you actually managed to come up with a clever trick, huh? You idiot!" In the middle of the battle, Aster reminded himself of this precious second life. He swore he wouldn't let it go to waste from the power of his sword to this new family. Without giving his opponent a moment to recover, Aster unleashed a barrage of powerful crimson slashes, leaving Kudo only able to gasp in shock at the sword in his hand. Aster suddenly vanished, leaving Kudo completely disoriented. His sword! It disappeared! But immediately an even more terrifying aura filled the air as Aster closed the distance, roaring with determination. "I won't hold myself back anymore." Aster swung his hand, releasing all his explosive magic into a direct strike, causing Kudo's eyes to widen in sheer terror at the world-shattering power heading straight for her. "My little brother, has he already unlocked his true power this quickly? I'm definitely a goner this time." Sigh. Kudo snapped awake in bed, her eyes completely blank as she questioned, "Is this my room?" Seeing her younger sister awake, Manhwa gently drew back the curtains to let the sunlight flood the room, smiling. "Oh, you're finally awake. You slept in really late." Kudo sat up instantly. Memories of that terrifying clash suddenly came rushing back, making her panic as she tried to recall. What on earth happened at the end of my duel with Aster? Manhwa calmly explained that Aster was the one who carried her all the way back here. The kid had even lied to save his sister's face, claiming she had simply fallen asleep in the middle of the match, due to being exhausted from her long journey. But Kudo knew the truth was far from that simple. "No, that's not right." She shuddered, recalling the moment Aster's crimson blade swung down. In that split second of life and death, she had been absolutely sure she was going to be cut down by Aster. But in reality, he had actively deactivated his magic blade right before impact. What swept past her was merely the residual heat of that violent energy. Even though she knew Aster would never actually kill his own sister, his terrifying bloodlust and glowing red eyes in that moment still made a genius like Kudo tremble, genuinely believing she was about to die. Thinking of her both terrifying and thoughtful brother, Kudo let out a faint smirk. He really is the most irritating little brother, even though he's so much smaller than me. She resolutely grabbed her sword and turned to Manhwa. Sister Manhwa, is Aster heading out to battle again? I don't accept the outcome of that match. Burning with a desire for an immediate rematch, she declared, this time I'll use my full power right from the start. However, Manhwa calmly put out that spark with a single sentence. Knowing Aster, he's probably already left. You know how he is. Kudo stood frozen in the quiet room, realizing her troublesome little brother had indeed already set off. Hearing the news from Manhwa, Kudo gasped in disbelief when she learned there was a summons from the main house sent directly to Aster. Manhwa wondered if Kudo knew about what their father had just discussed, leaving her frozen in shock before she shrieked in absolute bewilderment, having never heard a single word about it. As the carriage rolled toward the main house, Aster stared thoughtfully out the window while Viscount Highfield anxiously explained who they were about to face. They are the Elder Council, the true rulers who govern the Elam clan from the shadows. They consist of former family heads and seniors who still wield massive influence despite having retired from the front lines. Highfield couldn't help but wonder why they hadn't paid any attention to Aster for the past 15 years, only to suddenly summon him right at this moment. I bet they're just bored and trying to satisfy their curiosity, ha-ha. He guessed that perhaps the incident at the sword dance festival had alerted the old men, who valued the family's reputation more than life itself. According to rumors, anyone who tarnishes the Elmham name is thrown into a cage as food for wild beasts. Yet Aster calmly recounted those brutal punishments. Highfield asked his son in shock where he had heard such things, but Aster only offered a faint smile and casually replied that he had heard it somewhere, and that he was already mentally prepared for execution or exile. Seeing his father worry because he was traveling without any guards, he reassured him that everything would be fine and revealed. His original plan had been to leave before his sisters returned. Aster shared that only when he wasn't around could Kudo truly spread her wings and fly. Thanks to his duel with her, he had begun to understand how to master the magic sword Graham and could feel the power of his 7 wings more clearly than ever before. Firmly gripping his sword, Aster looked at his father. With determined eyes, he made one final request. No matter what happens to me from now on, please do not save me. He really is a heartbreakingly sensible child, isn't he? Highfield looked at Aster with a deeply worried gaze and asked, are you really ready to survive all on your own? But just as a heavy silence fell over them, a loud shout from outside suddenly cut through the air. What do you mean, survive on your own? Stop acting so tough just because you're the youngest. In an instant, a figure leaped straight into the moving carriage, leaving both father and son completely stunned. Aster's eyes widened in disbelief as he recognized the familiar face. Sister Kuro, why on earth are you here? He couldn't believe his sister had actually chased the carriage on foot for such a long distance. Kuro climbed inside, panting heavily as she scolded him. Don't you think you're being a bit too cruel, leaving quietly without saying a single word to your own sister? She then revealed that she had overheard everything about Aster being summoned by the Grand Elders of the main house. Even Marfa, who is so incredibly talented, has never been summoned even once. That shows just how serious this is. Seeing Kuro's intention to tag along, Highfield grew worried and tried to stop her. But she firmly asserted, I know, Father. I heard you wanted us to watch over everything while you're away. I understand perfectly. Suddenly, Kuro's face turned incredibly solemn. She looked at Aster and said in a low, tense voice, if they're summoning you, it means something major is going down, doesn't it? Is that why we have to be this cautious? She didn't hesitate to repeat Marfa's warning that Aster might never come back. Seeing his sister worry so much, Aster gave a reassuring smile and said, you're blowing this out of proportion, sister. I'm just going to meet them and have a talk, that's all. Out of nowhere, Kuro pointed her finger straight at his face and declared, listen up, Aster. I really, really hate you. Because you're a guy because of the 7 wings and because you always get special treatment. How does she even have the breath to spit fire like this after running herself half to death? She continued to let out her long-buried feelings. Because you're stronger than me, your own older sister. And because you keep acting like an adult when you're just my little brother, I hate all of it. All. But beneath all that nagging was a rare warmth. Kuro made it clear that no matter how strong Aster was, or how much he tried to act tough, he would always be her precious little brother. So come back in one piece, and then we'll have our rematch. If you try to run away while you're ahead, I will never forgive you." Having said her piece, Kuro resolutely leaped out of the speeding carriage. She left Aster utterly dumbfounded, wondering what did she even come all this way for? Hyfrid watched his daughter's lively figure fade into the distance, then smiled and remarked, "She makes a pretty good rival, doesn't she?" Aster quietly gazed into the distance silently, thanking his short-tempered but deeply loving sister. With a resolute look, he made a promise to himself, "I will definitely return." Behind them, Kuro was still standing in the middle of the dusty road, waving goodbye to the carriage as it slowly vanished into the sunset. Meanwhile, Viscount Hyfrid and Aster had just arrived at the main gate of the main family estate. They were immediately blocked by a long line of heavily armed soldiers. One of the guards bowed respectfully, though his tone was grave. "Welcome back, Lord Hyfrid. The Grand Elder is already waiting inside." Aster thought to himself, "Are these old geezers trying to intimidate us right off the bat?" Sensing something was amiss, Hyfrid coldly rejected their guidance. "No need for a guide, I know the way." Yet the guards stubbornly closed in on them. "We cannot allow that, my lord. We are under strict orders to escort the two of you together." Looking at the spears surrounding them, Aster thought, "Just as I expected. He didn't summon us here just to dote on a grandson. This atmosphere doesn't feel like that at all." Standing before the magnificent grand castle, Aster looked up at the towering spires with a complex gaze. "How nostalgic. It has been a long time since I was last here." Noticing his son's distraction, Hyfrid spoke in a low voice, warning him, "I trust you understand, Aster. Do not lose your temper, at least not today, no matter what anyone says to you." The Viscount's anxiety was palpable as they walked surrounded by guards. He added in a whisper, "It all depends on how they play their hand. What I mean is, they are the real problem." Hyfrid tried to prepare Aster mentally before this fateful encounter. "Listen closely. The person we are about to meet is—" However, Aster's attention was captured by the quiet, empty training grounds in the distance. He thought to himself, Dallas is nowhere to be seen. Well, since his dominant hand was completely crushed, he won't be back anytime soon. His distraction made Hyfrid snap. "Are you even listening to me, Aster? Seriously, this boy? It's like talking to a brick wall. Why is your face always so blank? If he were my kid, I'd yell like that too. Ha ha!" Startled, Aster quickly turned back to reassure his father. "Huh. Yes, of course I am. I'll stay as quiet as a mouse today. After all, Sister did tell me to make sure I return safely." The two of them stopped before the massive wooden doors leading to the main hall. The guard's voice boomed out, announcing, "Lord Hyfrid and his son have arrived." The doors swung wide open, revealing a vast imposing hall. An old, yet incredibly powerful laughter echoed from the far end of the hall. "Ha, you've finally arrived. It has been over 15 years, hasn't it, my grandson?" Hyfrid immediately dropped to one knee on the red carpet, paying his respects. "It has been a long time, Sixth Patriarch." However, the mysterious figure sitting on the highest throne coldly corrected him. "No, it is Grand Elder." Aster narrowed his eyes, looking toward the three elders seated there. They sat towering on their intricately carved chairs, radiating a suffocating pressure that filled the entire room. Aster silently noted, "So that is Zenith A. Elmheim, the Sixth Patriarch. A true monster lurking in the shadows of the family." Surrounding him were the high-ranking members of House Elmheim, some of whom Aster had recognized from the Sword Dance Festival. But he suddenly noticed a crucial absence. "Is Roderick not here? Where did he go to miss out on this little show?" As if reading the boy's mind, Zenith spoke coldly. "That man is not here, child." He went on to explain that as the Knight Commander of the Royal Guard, Roderick does not to waste their time on things he called trivial. So these retired veterans had to generously step in to handle the clan's administrative affairs. Meanwhile, Aster quietly assessed the situation. Even though he'd never met him in his past life, Aster could clearly feel the heavy pressure radiating from this retired but highly influential figure. Seeing his father break out in a cold sweat from sheer tension, Aster wondered what this trivial matter they spoke of actually was. Zenith let out a meaningful chuckle before raising his voice. "You've already guessed it, haven't you? I heard that little pet dog of yours caused quite a scene at the sword dance assembly." Aster narrowed his eyes warily. As expected, that was the real reason they were summoned. Hyfrid quickly spoke up to defend his son, explaining that the current family head Roderick had personally resolved and closed the matter. but the other elders immediately shot him down, claiming it was just a show for the public while Elmheim's reputation had actually been severely tarnished. They argued that adopting a child of unknown origin was a mistake from the start, and they couldn't just ignore it if he dared bare his fangs at the main line. Unleashing a crimson bloodlust that filled the room, Zenith coldly declared that the only option was to expel Aster, and even Lord Highfried must face proper punishment. Unable to stand by and watch his father take the fall, Aster abruptly stood up and shouted, "Wait, I did this all on my own. My father has absolutely nothing to do with this." The boy is actually talking back to those old geezers now. "You're losing your cool, kid." Highfried closed his eyes in pure anxiety while Aster quietly observed the elders sitting high above. Zenith let out a cold, contemptuous snort. "As expected, that brat has no manners. How dare a mere child interrupt when adults are speaking?" He began to flex his power. "Under my banner there are 12,000 knights. We all bear the Elmheim name, but our knights are not a unified force. There are countless eyes always aiming for that supreme seat." His gaze swept across the solemn-faced elders sitting around him, and his voice dropped to a growl. "Of course, the same goes for this very room." Zenith stood up, planting his staff firmly on the floor, and declared, "We only want peace of mind. The proof that you won't bring harm to Elmheim is—" Suddenly, he drew a glowing red magic sword and pointed it straight at Highfried, leaving him utterly stunned. The old man brought up the humiliation of his past. "Do you still remember? Even when you failed to protect your lord dragging the Elmheim name through the mud, it was right here that we had Roderick sever that arm of yours." Zenith's eyes glowed crimson with sheer madness as he roared a brutal command. "This time take that brat's head, that old bastard!" Damn, this is way too cruel. They're supposed to be family. Yet he's such a heartless bastard. Faced with that cold-blooded demand, Aster stared in shock at his father's back. Yet Highfried stood as firm as a mountain, resolutely declaring, "I refuse. If I must execute my own son, I would rather end my own life." Hearing that absolute, unwavering declaration, Aster choked out, deeply moved, "Father." Zenith only smirked coldly. "Is that so? In that case..." He slammed his sword onto the stone floor as Zenith delivered a brutal death sentence. "Then you shall die. Your wife, your daughters, that brat. Everyone." He laughed maniacally, declaring proudly, "As of today, your house is officially wiped off the map." Instantly, the guards drew their swords and closed in, pointing their sharp blades at the necks of the father and son. In this life-or-death situation, Highfried could only grit his teeth in sheer frustration. Surrounded by a forest of blades, Aster suddenly spoke up, mocking him in a sarcastic tone. "Why are you so scared, Grand Elder?" The insolent question caught Zenith completely off guard. He widened his eyes and snarled, "What did you say?" "Surprised you, old bastard, haha." Without a single shred of fear, Aster continues to rub salt into the wounds of those in power. Even with blades pressed right against his neck, he defiantly declares, "If you're that terrified of being bitten by your own lapdog, then go ahead, exile me, execute me. Do whatever you want. But if you dare lay a finger on my family..." He tightly grips the front of his shirt, his eyes burning with a murderous glare. Catching his father's shocked expression, Aster silently whispers, "I'm sorry." "Father, it looks like I'm still not very good at keeping my mouth shut." With that, he tears his shirt open, exposing his bare back. The guards are so utterly petrified they can barely squeak out, "What? What is that?" The glowing crest on his back is a crimson emblem featuring 7 massive pairs of wings, vividly clear and radiating a dark, ominous red magic. A heavy, malevolent aura smothers the room. Amidst the suffocating dread, Aster roars out his final warning, "When that day comes, these 7 wings will become the enemies of Elhem. You'd better think twice. Dare to bully his family and your dead meat." The entire hall falls into shocked silence before exploding into endless whispers. What on earth is this? Could that really be the 7-winged crest? The elders can't help but be skeptical. Or is it just a fake? For hundreds of years, this crest has never once appeared on a human body. Zenith narrows his eyes at the glowing crimson mark on Aster's back and demands, "What is the meaning of this thing you are displaying? Do you even comprehend what it represents?" Facing the blades pressed against him, Aster calmly replies, "I do. Rumor has it that the more wings one has, the more attention they draw." Suddenly, a young man, with blue hair sitting nearby, bursts into hearty laughter. "Ah ha ha ha! Ah, my apologies. Please do carry on." Zenith lowers his voice, explaining the origins of the winged crest, which was originally an organ, while created by spirits on the human body to share mana. Through generations of inheritance, humans have deepened and developed that power, yet not a single soul has ever reached the seven-wing realm, except for the spirit race, the ancestors who birthed this power. Zenith's explanation leaves Aster deeply puzzled. The spirit race. Does that mean I'm one of them? The old man coldly adds, perhaps, assuming those 7 wings of yours are real. Refusing to get caught up in speculation about his origin, Aster firmly asserts, I am a son of the Highfield family. My origin no longer matters. His eyes flare with a defiant challenge as he looks directly at those surrounding him. What I want to know right now is, are you truly prepared to make an enemy out of me? Thankfully, he stays sharp and doesn't let them lead him by the nose regarding his origins. He almost fell right into their trap. Analyzing the situation, Aster declares in a commanding voice, even if I am exiled from Elham, plenty of knights and nobles would gladly welcome someone bearing the 7-winged crest. He exposes the ruler's true fear of potential rebellion, and asserts that the only logical move is to keep him close. The power of the 7 wings is now like a mighty banner, one that could even surpass the influence of Duke Roderick. Looking at their pale, terrified faces, Aster coldly declares, even Elmham is not a unified family. A rebellion is inevitable. The Highfield family once witnessed a catastrophic civil war that dragged the entire kingdom into its vortex, and Aster knows all too well that history is bound to repeat itself. To protect himself and his family, he is willing to take the gamble and settle things once and for all right here and now. Staring at the glowing red mark on Aster's back, Zenith growls, do you really think you're worth that much? The old man is backing down purely driven by his own greed and ambition. He suspects there is absolutely no proof those 7 wings are real. In response to his doubt, Aster smirks defiantly. If you believe they're fake, then go ahead and kill me right now. His gaze turns freezing cold as he delivers his final warning. But if you do, it will mean war between us. Privately, Aster tells himself that if Elam actually makes a move, destroying him right now would be effortless. He is simply waiting to see how these old geezers will take the bait. Just as the tension reaches its absolute peak, the blue-haired man suddenly speaks up, cutting in. Well, it seems this conversation is only dragging on. Wearing a calculating smile, he proposes to Zenith, my lord, why don't we set a trial for him instead? To the bewilderment of the other nobles, the man known as Count Mage convinces everyone that this is the perfect opportunity to witness the true power of the 7 wings. Before deciding Aster's fate, he emphasizes that a prestigious martial house like Elmham must surely have an appropriate test. Staring into Mage's blue eyes, Aster is stunned. Could this man really be Count Mage? There's no doubt about it. This guy is an ally. Pretty clever of him to play both sides like that. Very well. Ha ha ha, follow me, the old patriarch commands as he walks off exuding authority. Correcting the tongue of an ignorant grandson is also a grandfather's duty. Aster is led down to a dark dungeon surrounded by rusted iron chains. He silently feels the freezing chill of this place. Is this where the trial takes place? It's so dark. Leading him deep into the pitch-black tunnels connected to an underground aqueduct and shelter, Zenith reveals that this was originally a bunker for emergency evacuations. However, the true purpose of this place is far more sinister, as the family has been secretly breeding a ferocious magic beast here. The chief elder coldly announces that Aster's trial is incredibly simple. All he needs to do is defeat that beast. Walking through the gloomy space, the Viscount of Highfield cannot hide his anxiety. He gently reminded his son, I told you to keep it well hidden, didn't I? The existence of the 7 wings was no laughing matter. Yet Aster remained unusually calm, casually replying that something so eye-catching was bound to be discovered sooner or later. Gripping the hilt of his sword tightly, he told himself that this was the perfect opportunity to prove himself. He would no longer scurry around like a cornered rat. He had endured humiliation for too long, and now he wasn't afraid of anyone anymore. Standing before the deep, gaping pit, Hyfrid warned him once again, make sure you don't let your guard down. Without a single shred of hesitation, Aster grabbed the iron chain and plummeted into the abyss, leaving behind only a decisive, I'm heading down first then. From above, Count Mace watched in silence with a knowing smile. As Aster's feet touched the freezing water at the bottom of the pit, he could feel the heavy darkness closing in on him. It was indeed pitch black. Even with his night vision, Aster struggled as his sight was severely limited. It wasn't completely hopeless, but he still couldn't see a single thing. From high above, Zenith's voice echoed down, dripping with sarcasm as he spoke of another soul who had once been given the chance to redeem their name here. But their end was nothing more than a horribly mangled corpse on the cold ground. He mockingly recalled how in their final moments that person did nothing but weep and scream in a pathetic display. Suddenly, a colossal shadow with glowing eyes materialized right behind Aster, accompanied by the Great Elder's chilling warning, "Don't disappoint me now, kid." It was a massive magical beast covered in vibrant blue fur, radiating a sinister purple energy with bloodshot eyes burning with rage. Opening its mouth, it let out a thunderous roar, revealing sharp fangs ready to tear its prey to shreds. Facing the savage creature as it charged wildly at him, Aster decisively drew his sword ready for the life-or-death trial to begin. He is way too reckless. If it were me, I would have run away in the last episode. Ha ha. As expected, the rumors about the Elmham family secretly raising magical beasts right inside their mansion are entirely true. Facing the colossal monster, Aster couldn't help but pity himself for being born in such a crazy place where these sinister creatures dwell. Catching sight of the broken sword and the bloody hand of the previous failure, lying abandoned on the ground, Aster braced himself as the beast let out a terrifying roar and lunged with overwhelming murderous intent. However, he easily dodged its pounce. His flawless sword strikes sent the monster straight to its grave. But before he could even celebrate, a sudden twist occurred as dark purple tentacles burst from the beast's back. Aster gasped in shock. "What?" He was stunned to realize that this was no ordinary beast, but an immortal entity, a true undead. Witnessing this sinister sight from above, Viscount Highfield yelled in outrage, unable to comprehend why such a hideous thing was present in the mansion's dungeon. Zenith coldly explained that this creature was naturally drawn to the scent of blood and death, so he had kept it for his swordplay experiments. He casually revealed that it would never die whether slashed or burned, and its secret duty is to clean up the family's unwanted corpses. How horrifying! Is it a bottomless pit for disposing of bodies? Hifrid retorted sharply, arguing that facing an undead monster was far too overwhelming even for the most seasoned knights. He demanded to know if Zenith was intentionally leaving the one who carried the title of the Seven Wings to die here. Zenith only sneered coldly, declaring that if Aster died, it would only prove he was a low-rate fraud and someone without wings. It wasn't even worth being used as an ornament. He casually added that even if Aster lost his life, he would still be useful and his death might actually be a more favorable outcome for his schemes. Standing behind the iron bars, Count Mace only watched in silence with a mysterious smile. Looking down from above, he thought to himself, "After boasting like that, you better not go and die so easily." Down in the dark pit, Aster swung his sword continuously, but he quickly realized something was wrong when his slashes seemed utterly useless. "No matter how many times I slash at it, I still don't feel any resistance at all." The monster was completely unfazed. In fact, its regeneration speed was so terrifying that it far exceeded normal undead. By nature, the undead are entities entirely devoid of life. To destroy them completely, one must usually burn them with sunlight or use holy relics to purify their dark souls. And if neither method is possible, the basic guide to fighting the undead teaches that it is best to avoid engaging them altogether. Fighting unnecessarily will only exhaust you and lead to an early grave, right? Yet Aster firmly declared, "Of course I have no intention of backing down. If I only use mediocre moves, then the title of the Seven Wings will mean absolutely nothing." To prove his true worth, he decided to channel all his strength into a single strike. "I will use my purest power to crush this undead." Witnessing the powerful burst of magic, they wondered in shock. What kind of earth-shattering magic is this? Is this truly the ultimate power of the Seven Wings? Above, Highfield and the others were also deeply shaken. What on earth is happening down there? Did he actually manage to defeat it? Amidst the thick dust, Aster still stood firm with his sword in hand, but Zenith only let out a cold huff. What a shame," he muttered, just as a dark shadow suddenly. It lunged at him with terrifying speed. Aster was pinned to the ground by its colossal claws. The monster roared as it lunged to deliver the finishing blow, causing Hifrid to scream in desperate panic, "Aster!" In that critical split second, Count Mace suddenly stopped the Viscount, who was about to leap down to save his son. "Surely you aren't planning to do something as foolish as jumping down to save him, are you?" Faced with Hifrid's fury at being stopped while his son was in mortal danger, Mace calmly advised him to keep his cool. "Keep my cool? He is my son. Could you just stand there and do nothing? Bystanders always talk big." Mace pointed down into the deep pit and said, "Look closely down there. It seems that kid is still harboring some sort of plan in his head." Sure enough, even though he was pinned to the ground, Aster flashed a confident smile and thought to himself, "What luck, it looks like this method is actually working." The magical beast suddenly became unusually thin and withered as if all its life force was being sucked dry. Seizing the moment, Aster decisively drove his sword straight through the evil creature's body. He roared with determination, "Then I will just keep doing this over and over until you completely turn to dust." Blazing red slashes were unleashed in rapid succession at a speed so dizzying that they crushed the monster's body. Witnessing that masterful footwork, Hifrid was stunned, realizing he had seen it somewhere before. He noted that the technique was slightly different from what he remembered, but its power was undeniable. A storm of crimson blades completely engulfed the monster, creating a terrifying pressure that made the entire dungeon shake violently. The guards panicked and cried out for help as the ceiling began to collapse, and the ground cracked open, a truly horrific sight. Grand Elder Zenith muttered in utter shock, "Is this the true power of the Seven Wings?" "Just accept the reality, you stubborn old man. That is exactly what it is." As the dust gradually cleared, the onlookers were left in a state of absolute shock. One of them stammered, wondering if it was finally over, or what the hell just happened. While their eyes were locked on the deep crater where the beast had just vanished, Zenith, looking down from above with glowing red eyes, realized that Aster hadn't used any advanced technique at all. He had simply used the sheer overwhelming power of his vast mana pool to drag the zombie's corpse into a massive vortex and grind it to dust. Standing amidst the ruins, Aster exhaled a soft breath, his eyes still glowing intensely, forcing Zenith to silently acknowledge that the level of someone who possessed the seven-winged crest was indeed on a completely different level. Zenith turned to Hifrid and asked if this growth had been part of his plan all along. Still in shock, the Viscount admitted that even he never expected his son to make such a massive leap forward. Count Mace let out a smug smile, cutting through the tense silence to ask the elder if he had accepted the results of the trial yet. Looking at the pale faces around him, Zenith declared firmly that no one there would dare object. Mace then excitedly called down into the pit, shouting to Aster that he had officially passed the trial, urging him to climb back up. Looking at the iron chains that had been completely shattered by the shockwaves of his own attack, Aster scratched his head sheepishly and asked if someone could toss him down a rope. How embarrassing. A hero who can't even climb up on his own, ha-ha. Once he was back up, Aster had a private talk with Zenith in a luxurious room where the elder reminded him that if he threw away this golden opportunity to join the main family, there wouldn't be a second chance. With his back still bearing raw cuts from the battle, Aster firmly made it clear that he had zero interest in fighting for succession. He bluntly pointed out that if someone like him kept hanging around the estate, his cousins would never be able to sleep at night, and that his true home would always be House Hifrid. Hearing this, Zenith burst into a loud laugh, asking if Aster honestly thought those words sounded humble. The Grand Elder's gaze suddenly turned razor-sharp, piercing straight into his soul. He declared that Aster couldn't hide the blazing ambition burning deep in his eyes. In a low, heavy voice, Zenith asked if Aster was secretly planning to point his blade at House Elmheim in the future. Met with Aster's cautious silence, the old man delivered a final psychological blow, declaring that Aster's real target was Roderick's head. Seeing Aster's shock, Zenith laughed out loud again, telling him not to be so defensive, since he had no intention of prying into his deepest secrets just yet. Aster couldn't fathom what this sly old fox was really up to. Feeling suspicious, Aster questioned, "Why are you doing this? Aren't the rebels supposed to be your enemies? So you can read my mind? Impressive." Zenith casually admitted that the Elmheim family was far from the united front they showed the world. He knew very well that Roderick was far too domineering and tyrannical. If Aster's existence could serve as a check on his power, the old man was more than willing to tolerate it. However, his gaze suddenly turned deadly cold as he issued a heavy warning. "But if the day comes when you dare to turn your fangs against me, I'm sure you already know just how horrific the consequences will be." Aster quietly slipped out the door, cursing under his breath. "Tisk, what a troublesome old monster from House Elmheim." The moment he saw Aster step out, Viscount Hifrid rushed over in a panic, bombarding him with questions. "Aster, are the two of you finished talking? What did he say to you?" Aster calmly explained that the Grand Elder wanted to induct him into the main house, but he had flatly rejected the offer. Hearing this, Hifrid was so shocked he froze on the spot, stammering, "You did what?" To the Viscount, throwing away a chance to enter the main house was an unbelievable waste. There is absolutely no reason to pass up such a golden opportunity. What an absolute pity! Count Mace approached from behind, reminding Aster that if he officially joined the main family, he would enjoy privileges, far greater than anything he had now. Aster narrowed his eyes at this mysterious blue-haired man and asked straight out, "You're Count Mace, aren't you? Mace, why did you make a proposal earlier that sounded like you were trying to help me?" His suspicion was met with a light, knowing chuckle. "What are you talking about? I just felt like teasing an arrogant brat like you." But just as quickly, Mace dropped his playful facade. He placed a hand on Aster's shoulder, his voice turning serious. "But jokes aside, starting today you have officially become a seven-winged bearer both in name and in reality." He forced Aster to look closely at his surroundings to understand the heavy weight and true value of the seven-winged crest he bore. Inside the luxurious hall, the eyes of the gathered nobles were locked onto him, dripping with all sorts of sinister calculations. Some lusted after it, whispering to themselves, "I must have it. It must be mine at all costs." Others, gripped by fear, wanted to destroy it. "We had better eliminate him before he becomes an obstacle." There were even those who saw him as nothing but a tool, thinking, "After all, he's just a child. There are plenty of ways for us to exploit him," as Mace whispered coldly into his ear. "We'd be better off getting rid of him. Some people might only see you as a tool, but after all, he's still just a kid, and there are plenty of ways we can use him," Maze coldly whispered in his ear. "Aster, let this be my final warning. From now on, the number of people targeting you is going to skyrocket. I have a feeling he's only going to get into more and more trouble from here on." Aster narrowed his eyes, looking at Count Mace with suspicion. "Are you one of those people too, my lord?" Faced with the boy's guarded stance, Count Mace calmly revealed his true identity as a member of the Knight Academy's council. He explained that creating trials for promising young talents was simply part of his duty. He then gestured subtly toward the old men standing over there who shared the same intention. Mace smiled enigmatically, expressing his anticipation for the day Aster would officially enter their academy. "We shall meet again soon." As the green-haired man gave a friendly wave goodbye, Aster watched his departing figure, silently noting that he was an incredibly strange person, and he told himself it was still far too early to consider him an ally. Viscount Highfried walked over, placing a hand on his son's shoulder, urging him to set off quickly so they could head back and tell his sisters all about today's excellent performance. Aster gave his father a faint smile in response, but in his heart, he was quietly worried that if his mother saw these wounds, she would surely faint. Meanwhile, at the main estate, a knight knelt before Roderick to report the shocking news. "Commander, we have received a report that Master Dallas died during the trial that Lord Zenith ordered the other day." Instead of grieving for his son's death, Roderick only coldly replied that he already knew, immediately shifting his attention back to the child of the Highfried family, who had just been summoned by the elders. He casually asked about Aster's fate, leaving the knight utterly dumbfounded, wondering if the Duke didn't care in the slightest about his own flesh and blood. To him, his own children were probably nothing but disposable tools with no regard for their life or death. "Go on, speak," Roderick commanded, his expression completely unchanged. The knight continued his report, stating that, as expected, the child indeed possessed the seven-winged crest, fearing that if this situation continued, the balance of power that had long been maintained within Elmheim might completely collapse. The knight then suggested whether they should take any preventive measures, but Roderick maintained his cold demeanor and flatly ordered, "Just leave him be." Sitting majestically in his seat of power, he asserted that if they were shaken by an obstacle of this level, then Elmheim would have been wiped out a long time ago. Sitting majestically on his throne, Roderick looked down coldly at the knight kneeling at his feet, casually declaring that there was no need to rush because sooner or later, those legendary wings would eventually fall into his hands anyway. To this ruthless duke, letting Aster survive on his own was nothing more than an entertaining game. Until then, just let him run wild and enjoy himself as much as he wants. Let's see how long the child who successfully escaped that day can manage to hold out. Roderick flashed a scheming smile, his blood-red eyes gleaming with possessiveness at the mention of the boy's old name, the child of the seven wings, Ash. So he already knew that Aster was the very child he had searched in vain for all those years ago. Time flew by. 4 years later, at the gates of the prestigious Dolocene Knight Academy, the atmosphere was livelier than ever as an announcement boomed over the speakers, requesting all applicants to quickly gather for registration. Amidst the bustling crowd, the appearance of a tall, dignified figure instantly caught everyone's curiosity, drawing whispers from all around. "Hey, isn't that famous person?" "No way. I heard rumors that he was supposed to be way more giant and heavily built." Ignoring the gossip, Aster walked up to the registration desk. The officer coldly pushed a waiver in front of him, emphasizing that the kingdom and the academy would not take any responsibility for any injuries or accidents during the exam. The guard then proceeded with a mandatory procedure. "Now show us your wing crest for inspection. We can't have anyone with insufficient mana sneaking in here." The officer flipped through the registry, but the moment he read the next name, he froze in utter shock. "All right, next is Aster F. Elmheim's crest." Under the official's astonished gaze, the 14-year-old youth smirked slightly, turning around slowly with his eyes gleaming with pride. Aster casually replied to the request. In a highly provocative tone, "You want me to show my crest?" "Well, my crest is in a rather private spot, so it's a bit hard to just show it off. Would it be all right if I just pass by using my face instead?" In the middle of the magnificent Knight Academy grounds, Aster had become the center of attention. A snobbish-looking young man approached and called out loudly, "Hey, I'm talking to you." "Yes, you, the one standing there with that smug look on your face?" He introduced himself as Vigo Smith and began to mock him. "You look like a complete nobody. I have no idea which prestigious family's young master you are, but didn't you come to the wrong place?" He pointed boastfully at the Academy's emblem, emphasizing that this place was reserved only for the absolute elite among knights. Vigo tilted his chin up and asked, "Do you even know what this is?" "This is the examination venue for the proud knight apprentices of the kingdom." In stark contrast to his agitation, Aster simply replied, "If that is the case, then there is no problem at all," and brushed past him as if he were nothing but thin air. Ignored, Vigo barked in frustration, "Hey, wait a second." He babbled on and on about how everyone here had to go through grueling, brutal training, always harboring the dream of walking the glorious path of the elite. "This guy, he might actually make a better teacher than a student, don't you think? What a chatterbox." Looking down at Aster's weapon, Vigo sneered. "And look at you carrying a tiny sword that looks like a kid's toy on your hip. This place is no playground for a wet-behind-the-ears swordsman like you." He waved his hand rudely to shoo him away. "Seriously, if you just came here to sightsee, you should head home. Get lost and fast." Smith's bullying of the newcomer did not escape the eyes of the other candidates, who remarked with a sigh, "There he goes again. Smith, the guy who always picks on the newbies. He pulls that same stunt every year. Doesn't he ever get tired of it?" However, another candidate noticed something unusual. Lowering his voice, he warned his friend, "But more importantly, isn't the guy he is picking on the rumored member of the Elmheim family? Did you know that is the rumored Aster of the Seven Wings?" This news left the other young man utterly stunned. "Huh, 7 wings." Right at that moment, a figure approached from behind, speaking in a smug, sarcastic tone. Well, I was wondering who this was. Turns out it is none other than my dear cousin Aster." Great, another annoying fly buzzing in his ear. How exhausting. Aster turned to look at the speaker, his eyes narrowing warily. It was Gurion, another member of the main Elmheim family. Wearing a fake smile, he approached and spoke, "It has been a long time, cousin." He casually mocked Aster's ambiguous origins, since no one knew exactly when or where he was born. "So allow me the liberty of calling you my cousin, all right?" Yet in the face of that attitude, Aster remained calm and brought up Dallas. "As for Dallas, I am deeply sorry." However, Gurion immediately brushed it off with a look of utter disdain. He insisted, "No, do not worry about it. A disgrace to the family like him deserved to die." He could not even hide his satisfaction. "To be honest, I actually feel relieved now that he is gone." Gurion continued to vent about his late brother, claiming that Dallas was nothing but a bossy, arrogant nuisance. But immediately after, his tone turned threatening. "I do not care if you are of the 7 Wings or whatever, but you had better not look down on those of the main family." He turned on his heel and walked away, leaving a chilling warning, "Because in this place, there will be no one left to protect you." The presence of the 2 members of the Elmheim family made the surrounding candidates worry about their own luck. Running into heavy hitters like this, our only hope is to gang up on them. The crowd began to whisper about the underlying conflict between the main and branch families of the legendary Martial God clan, everyone fearing they might get dragged into this mess. In the midst of that, another candidate timidly approached Aster and asked, "Wait, are you?" "No, actually, it must be you." You are from the Elmheim family, right?" Aster smiled slightly politely, shook his hand, and replied, "You can just call me Aster Sr." Meanwhile, the venue for the first round was quickly announced. In a solemn atmosphere, a commander standing on high formally congratulated the candidates who had worked hard to be there. He began his passionate speech. "First, I want to express my gratitude for your courage and patriotism." The commander emphasized the gap in status between the royal knights and those country knights from the provinces, declaring that they were the ones who served the king. With his fist clenched tightly against his chest, he roared, "We are the proud swords! Ready to sacrifice our lives in battle. We have no place for dull, useless swords." I guess every newcomer gets to hear some of their propaganda. Every school is like that, huh? Treat today's exam as a real battlefield and show us your true worth to the absolute fullest. The shout of the commander echoed through the arena. Standing among the crowd of candidates, Aster smirked, thinking those words were ridiculous, yet an indescribable emotion welled up inside him, as he had finally made it back to this place. The path to becoming a royal knight, something he was not even allowed to touch back when he was wingless. Behind this door lay the world of the strong which he could never reach in his past life. And the one who still reigned at the very top of that world was none other than the Grand Commander of the Royal Knights, Roderick Elmham. Looking at the powerful back of his enemy, Aster gritted his teeth and swore a silent oath. "Just you wait, Roderick. I will catch up to you in no time. Revenge is a dish best served cold, even if it takes 15 years. He had to play the long game to achieve his ambition. The first thing he had to do was pass this grueling selection exam. A loud announcement over the loudspeaker cut through his thoughts. "All right, let us begin. And here is the first exam." Instantly, sharp spears rained down from above, tearing through the air and piercing the unlucky candidates, turning the scene into a gruesome bloodbath. Aster watched in shock. The first challenge is called the Vanguard Tower. The last one of you standing will be the winner. The examiner's cold announcement echoed amidst the blood-curdling screams. Magic spears continuously rained down from the top of the tower, creating a chaotic free-for-all as the candidates were ambushed from all directions. The panicked crowd screamed in despair. "What are we supposed to do about this crazy thing?" "Run! If we stay here, we are all going to die!" Amidst a torrential downpour of attacks, the candidates screamed, calling out to group up, cover their backs, and block the assault from above. Meanwhile, the examiner coldly watched and assessed the situation. Even with the experienced ones trying to resist, the survival rate was only around 30%. Those half-hearted countermeasures would quickly reach their limit, as more and more lives were lost to those razor-sharp magic spears. Seriously, if taking an exam means risking my life like this, I'm out of here. What the Academy truly wanted to see was an extraordinary ability to solve problems, something only those possessing the true crest of the wings could ever achieve. Amidst the chaotic battlefield, Aster stood completely still like a statue, leaving everyone around him bewildered. "Why is that idiot just standing there frozen like a fool?" Gurion narrowed his eyes in utter contempt, convinced that Aster was paralyzed with fear, and silently cursed him, wishing he'd get turned into a pincushion. Little did he know Aster's hand had already quietly gripped the hilt of his sword, ready for an earth-shattering release of power. Suddenly, a blazing red surge of mana erupted, tearing through the air around Aster. With a single swing of his sword, he unleashed a massive vortex of energy, instantly blowing away every single incoming spear. Witnessing this unbelievable sight, the other candidates could only freeze in sheer shock. Did he just deflect all those projectiles? Standing at the center of the blazing crimson storm, Aster held his head high, his eyes glowing with fierce pride. He smirked, issuing a silent challenge. "Come on, throw everything you've got at me." This was barely even a warm-up for him. Amidst the torrential rain of projectiles, Aster unleashed his crimson mana, shaping it into a terrifying tempest that completely shielded his body. Staring at the unbelievable sight, one candidate gasped in terror. "Just what kind of monster is he? Not a single arrow can even touch him." Even the examiner couldn't help but marvel at Aster's incredible control over his mana, as he, seemed to stand at the eye of an absolutely impenetrable hurricane. As the onslaught finally subsided, the dazed survivors looked around the wreckage, wondering if the nightmare was truly over. The examiner coldly scanned the field, his voice ringing out. "Well done, everyone. Look at the bodies scattered all around you. Those of you still standing are the ones who have passed the first trial." Without giving them a moment to catch their breath, he immediately ordered everyone to follow him to the next location. Hearing the senior beside him complaining about how cruel the examiner was, Aster smirked. What's wrong already, exhausted senior? He certainly knew how to throw a sarcastic jab. The senior could only gape in utter disbelief at Aster's casual attitude, especially since the guy had just unleashed a massive amount of mana without showing a single hint of exhaustion. He silently marveled at the power of the seven-winged Aster, eagerly waiting to witness his next battle. Meanwhile, Gurion received a ruthless secret order from a powerful figure lurking in the shadows of his clan. You must stop him from becoming a royal knight at all costs for the future of our Elman family. As they entered the next round, the organizers suddenly announced a twist. All candidates had to switch to identical standard-issue swords to ensure absolute fairness. While everyone else complained about how tedious and annoying this rule was, Aster silently handed over his precious sword. A sharp-eyed candidate realized this sudden rule was actually targeted directly at him. They're definitely wary of that strange sword of yours, Aster. Looking thoughtfully at the standard sword in his hand, Aster was suddenly approached by Gurion and his lackeys, who sneered maliciously. Well, isn't this exactly what I'd expect from you, dear cousin? It looks like you've already managed to tame yourself a little lackey. His words made the senior standing next to Aster panic, instantly protesting. Hey, who are you calling a lackey? Gurion coldly stared him down. If I remember correctly, you're the heir of the Baron Smith family, aren't you? Leaning in close, he whispered a heavy threat into the senior's ear. A third-rate noble from some backwater countryside. You're going to suffer terribly. If you wag your tail for the wrong master, that is. Terrified of the main family's immense power, the senior immediately backtracked, waving his hands frantically. Wait, hold on a second. Young Master Gurion, I have absolutely nothing to do with this guy. Talk about spineless, he's about to wet his pants from just a tiny threat. Aster could only let out a dry smirk at the instant betrayal. Suddenly, the air grew incredibly tense. As the candidates began eyeing each other warily, the examiner's voice boomed across the area announcing the rules for the next stage. Listen up, everyone. I will now explain the rules for the second exam. While the first round was a simple battle of offense and defense, all candidates will now be divided into 3 teams. Your mission is to capture each other's bases scattered throughout this forest. Successfully planting your team's flag on the pedestal at any base will count as capturing it. Whichever team holds 2 or more bases before the final bell rings will claim victory. The examiner also made sure to emphasize that any actions rendering the flag unusable, such as destroying or hoarding it, are strictly forbidden. However, other than that, absolutely anything goes. The swords you've been given, you can consider them a license to slaughter your enemies. The examiner then boldly announced the team rosters for the exam. Gurion stood full of confidence under the red flag, while the cowardly heir of Baron Smith was placed on the yellow team. Aster silently took his position under the blue flag, his eyes glowing with intense focus as he sized up his opponents. The moment a smoke signal shot up from the fortress, signaling the official start of the exam, Aster immediately bolted into the forest. It was a complete free-for-all now. Classmates turned enemies. Truly brutal. Staring at the blue flag in his hand, Aster quickly analyzed the battlefield. There would be 3 bases in total. To win, they needed to secure at least 2, including their own, but he suddenly realized a harsh truth. What did this setup actually mean? Out of the 3 teams, only 1 single team would make it through this exam alive. Is that really how it is? Seeing Aster confirm this, his teammate looked visibly anxious. You're right, but is there something about it that's bothering you? Wait, doesn't that mean we're going to have to clash with House Elman? Aster just stared ahead in silence, lost in thought. His teammates were trembling in fear, and one of them, breaking into a cold sweat, cried out, Don't you get it? We are absolutely terrified of the Elmham family's revenge. He desperately explained that their opponent was the young master of the main family line, and simply pointing a sword at him would destroy their future as a knight. At worst, their families and followers could be targeted too. It was a nightmare scenario that absolutely nobody wanted to face. No one wanted to make enemies of those powerful elites. That entire clan is already sitting at the very top, so who could possibly dare to touch his son? Aster coldly asked back, So are you guys planning to just give up on this exam? They were willing to accept defeat, this time just to save their lives. After all, if it's just an exam, there is always a next time. It's much better to do that than to throw away the rest of their lives right here. To the weak, the Elmham family was an unstoppable, tyrannical specter, and Gurion was the very symbol of that reign of terror. Aster dashed through the forest alone, thinking to himself that he never expected to end up isolated in a team battle, but their fear was completely understandable. The eerie silence of the forest made Aster suspicious. Since no battles had broken out yet, he wondered if they were just being cautious of one another, or if there was some other scheme at play. Stepping past the old stone walls, Aster suddenly froze as a mysterious blonde youth appeared from behind. He mused, I didn't expect that you would actually dare to come here all by yourself like this. Everything was playing out exactly as some mysterious figure had predicted. Aster watched in shock as the young man casually pulled down his team's flag. With a knowing smile, he said, I happen to have a little free time on my hands right now. I will let you come with me for a bit. They had plotted to surround him, leaving him with absolutely no chance. Before Aster could even process what was happening, Gurion appeared with a large squad. Behind him. With an overwhelming presence and a sinister smirk, he looked at his cousin and declared, I will show you, cousin, exactly how House Elman fights. The second round of the Royal Knight selection exam officially began, featuring an offense-defense battle. 20 contestants were divided into 3 teams, and the winning condition was to capture at least 2 bases by planting their team's flag there before time ran out. In the midst of the intense clashes, Aster immediately crossed swords with a formidable opponent. Defending against the powerful strikes, he asked, Aren't you on the yellow team? Aster looked suspiciously at the blonde youth in front of him. Then why are you planting a red flag? The youth with cold blue eyes replied nonchalantly, It's simple. Because we've formed an alliance. An alliance between me and House Elmer. This was Christopher Nolan, the bearer of the 5-star badge and the heir of the prestigious Nolan family, the creators of royal swordsmanship. Although overshadowed by Aster's 7-star brilliance in round 1, only 2 people had actually passed that challenge without even breaking a sweat, Aster and Nolan. This 5-star guy is actually no joke. Let's see how long he can keep this up. Both of them were considered rare, unpolished gems among the knights, but unfortunately they couldn't pass this round together. Blocking his opponent, Aster demanded, An alliance? Do you even understand what you're doing? Even if you do that, only one team can win. Nolan casually admitted that fact and dropped a shocking decision. Exactly. That's why I decided to let the main house win. While overwhelming Aster with his sword, he revealed their ruthless plan. Right now, my teammates and the Elmham family are probably attacking your base as we speak. Nolan explained that if they opposed them, the families of the other contestants would be in danger because of Gurion's threats. He coldly asserted that no one is foolish enough to stand in front of a speeding carriage, knowing full well they would be run over. To him, the noble knightly order was a strictly hierarchical society, and this was simply the natural way for those of noble blood to behave, to protect their own interests. At the moment of their powerful clash, Aster gritted his teeth and braced himself. Damn it! But a sharp crack rang out, and to his horror he saw cracks spreading. Watching his standard-issue sword slowly crumble, Aster stood in disbelief, questioning himself. This sword! It really is strange. Could that examiner have handed me a defective one? Are you really that slow, just realizing it now? You're way too naive. Nolan swung his sword dominantly, declaring, This is strictly a one-on-one duel between the 2 of us. He didn't hesitate to express his disdain for the Elmham family, and especially show-offs like Aster. The moment his standard-issue sword shattered, Aster gasped in shock. What? But instead of backing down, he quickly caught a sharp fragment, infused it with a glowing red magic, and launched a sudden counterattack, forcing Nolan to gasp in surprise. Taking advantage of his stunned opponent, Aster immediately spun around and fled the battlefield. Nolan roared in anger and gave chase. What you think you can run, you bastard? Get back here, ignoring the insults. Aster roared with determination. I'll deal with you later. Before that, I have someone else I need to deal with urgently. Watching Aster walk away, Nolan sneered, thinking Aster was scared out of his wits, and called him a disgrace. A disgrace to the knights! Nolan picked up a broken sword fragment from the ground and realized its quality was pathetic even for cheap gear. So that's how it is, he muttered to himself. This is definitely the Elman clan's doing. How dare they play dirty just to ruin the fun? Meanwhile, Aster ran back to his camp. He called out in a panic, Smith, are you okay? Oh no. Where did everyone go so much for getting help? From the top of the ramparts, Gurion appeared with a smug, mocking smile. You got here faster than I expected, cousin. That Nolan guy couldn't buy me any time at all, could he? Gurion sneered, mentioning how Nolan had confidently bragged that he could handle it alone, making Gurion actually look forward to it. Then Gurion casually announced that his team had just captured the third base, declaring it absolute dominance. Aster grit his teeth, his eyes blazing with fury as he saw his teammates lying unconscious all over the ground. He growled at Gurion. What did you do to my teammates? Gurion smirked at the scene just as a cold blade suddenly pressed against Aster's back. The one holding it was none other than Smith. The senior who was flattering him just moments ago had now despicably turned on him. Oh, that? Hey, don't blame me. Backing away, he made excuses for his betrayal. I told you from the start I wouldn't follow you, didn't I? There's no way I'm teaming up with a fool who dares to go against the Elman clan. Standing on the high ramparts, Gurion burst into booming laughter, mocking his cousin's isolation. Ha ha ha. Those guys didn't even bother to put up a fight. He looked down at Aster with utter contempt and added, even country bumpkins have enough brains to know which side they should stand on. Aster remained eerily calm. He asked back in a low, cold voice, do you really think that just having numbers is enough to defeat me? Gurion smirked with absolute confidence. No, you've got it all wrong. Cousin, I've already won. A bit too cocky, aren't you? You're just all bark and no bite. He casually reminded Aster of the rules, pointing out that the winning condition of this offense and defense battle was to hold 2 or more bases by the time the competition ended. Gurion exposed Aster's hopeless situation. Even if you run yourself ragged trying to plant flags at other bases right now, you don't have enough people left to guard those flags. He smugly laid out Aster's defeat, saying his team would just wait for Aster to leave, then stroll over to the other base and replace his flag with a red one. Holding up 2 fingers, he asserted, we only need at least 2 bases. As long as we hold them, we win. Aster's gaze suddenly turned razor-sharp as he coldly declared, then I'll make sure. You can't pull off that plan by taking down every single one of you right here. The sheer bloodlust radiating from him made Gurion's lackeys tremble in terror. However, Gurion remained incredibly smug. He laughed mockingly. You're just bluffing. That sword of yours is completely useless now, isn't it? He pointed down at the shattered fragments of the standard-issue sword scattered on the ground. Even if you had 7 wings without a weapon, you're nothing but a bird with its wings clipped. But hey, even penguins are still birds, right? Ha ha! Gurion continued to provoke him. Or are you actually planning to fight all of us here all by yourself? Looking at the broken sword in his hand, Aster smirked slightly. Impressive. Let's see. He let go without hesitation, letting the remaining shattered blade fall to the ground, leaving Smith, completely shocked and baffled by his bizarre action. Aster stared straight at his enemy and admitted, you planned things out much better than I expected. Gurion screamed triumphantly in his mind, I've definitely won, as he saw Aster's weapon completely shattered. Yet Aster's eyes still gleamed with a mysterious light as if he was preparing to unleash one final trump card to turn the tables. But right at the moment, the traitor was about to strike. Aster suddenly dodged with incredible speed, delivering a thunderous kick that sent him flying. That'll teach you to act tough, you poser. Before his opponents could even react, Aster turned into a blazing red streak, charging through the encirclement with overwhelming power. His lightning-fast magic slashes sent Gurion's lackeys crashing to the ground in an instant. Standing amidst the devastation, Aster looked up at the ramparts and declared, but even so, you made a big mistake by daring to stand against me. Talk about winning bare-handed. Aster's eyes blazed with bloodlust as he growled, because you just love sticking your nose into other people's business. You're going to pay the price. Gurion backed away in horror, trembling as he cursed Aster for being a monster. Ignoring the distance, Aster stomped his foot and launched himself into the air like a blazing red arrow. Witnessing this absurd sight, Gurion screamed in terror, no way is he actually flying straight at me! In the blink of an eye, Aster closed the distance, his cold breath brushing against his opponent's face. You're way too slow. A powerful blow left Gurion breathless, only able to let out painful groans. In that moment, memories of the first time he flew as a newborn baby suddenly rushed back to Aster. He could clearly feel the infinite power of mastering magic, the wonderful feeling that wings brought him. Aster grabbed Gurion's collar, slamming him hard against the solid stone wall. Looking down at his trembling enemy, begging him to stop, Aster casually realized the wall that once seemed so grand was now so fragile before his strength. It was as if he had just unlocked yet another level of his power. But to me it's nothing, Aster smirked with disdain. An earth-shattering magical explosion erupted, leaving the candidates standing below completely bewildered, clueless as to what was happening. Trembling in sheer terror, they asked themselves what kind of monstrous fighting that was. What on earth is wrong with those two? Through the thick, swirling dust, Aster's towering figure emerged from the ruined archway, coldly dragging his battered body. With Gurion completely defenseless on the ground like a broken toy, Aster stared blankly ahead and walked right past the stunned crowd without sparing them a single glance. He decisively let go, tossing the defeated loser onto the cold ground, leaving Gurion to groan in agony. Ugh, it hurts so bad. Honestly, if it were me, I would have thrashed him a few more times. You didn't complain like this when you were the one beating and bullying people. Even in miserable defeat, Gurion tried to use the last of his strength to order those around him. What are you idiots just standing there staring for? Get over here and kill this bastard right now, he screamed maniacally, using his family name to threaten them. This is an order from a member of the Elmham family. Under that heavy pressure, Smith frantically rushed over to pick up a sword from the ground, swearing under his breath in sheer panic. Damn it all! Seeing right through the weakness of the crowd in front of him, Aster coldly questioned them. Are you really that terrified of Elmham's revenge? The question struck a raw nerve, causing Smith to explode in frustration. Of course we're terrified. My Smith family is just a third-class noble house. They could wipe us out with a single breath, he shrieked, lamenting the harsh reality of this world. A world where low-ranking nobles are forced to obey and never dare to displease their superiors just to survive. Smith glared at Aster with deep resentment and screamed, How could someone like you who has everything in your hands ever understand the struggles of people like us? Aster silently watched the trembling man, his deep eyes showing no emotion. Then he let out a subtle, mysterious smile. Startled, Smith demanded, What the hell are you laughing at? In his mind, Aster recalled the words his sister Kudo once told him, You don't understand how those who have nothing feel. Even though he admitted he was in a position of privilege, Aster believed that because of this, there were things only he could accomplish. Pointing his broken sword at the pathetic Gurion on the ground, he declared resolutely, My enemy is Elmham. If you guys aren't up to the task, then I will stand up and change everything. Even a cornered beast will fight back, and one day this Elmham family will be crushed too. Aster's roar echoed throughout the arena. The arrogant and tyrannical Elmham family as we know it. I will crush them with my own two hands. The surrounding contestants stood in utter shock, unable to believe their ears. Trembling, Smith asked, Do you even realize what you're saying? With his eyes burning bright, Aster coldly confirmed, Yes, this is an official declaration of war. He warned them that blind loyalty to Elmham would only lead to betrayal and a miserable death. If you don't want that, the only way is to stand up and fight. The 7 pairs of wings on my back are the power to make that happen. Aster spoke with absolute authority, giving the crowd one final ultimatum. So make your choice. Will you follow him or will you follow me? Elmham Gurion shrieked in a frenzy, threatening to remember the face of anyone who dared to betray him, striking absolute terror into the hearts of the third-class nobles. Smith grit his teeth locked in a fierce internal struggle. He choked out in frustration. Damn it, we're dead either way. Talk about a tough spot for them. In the end, Smith decisively grabbed the blue flag and rushed toward Aster. Betting everything he had, he pressed, Are you absolutely sure you can defeat him? If you're just giving us false hope and in the end nothing changes, I will despise you forever. Faced with Aster's firm promise, I swear it. Smith summoned all his courage and roared, I, Vega Smith, the eldest son of the Smith family, officially pledge my support to Aster F. Elmham. Smith's action sent shockwaves through the entire roster of contestants. They realized that Gurion's plan had completely fallen apart. To everyone's utter astonishment, Aster coldly pressed the tip of his sword against his enemy's neck, officially securing his victory in this round. Smith shouted, shattering the dead silence, What are the rest of you just standing there for? This is our chance to show those arrogant Elmhams what we're made of. Let's put our stakes on the 7 wings. His resolute rallying cry began to sway the other contestants. They exchanged astonished glances at this sudden turn of events. Watching this unfold, Aster smirked, thinking to himself, Well, someone finally broke the ice. At least now I don't have to plant the flag myself. Snaring a huge catch like this is definitely a breath of fresh air. However, his eyes remained pensive. But this still isn't enough. I need more allies to completely overthrow the Elmham family on the other side. Gurion was groveling on the ground in utter humiliation when a worried lackey rushed over to check on him. Are you all right, Lord Gurion? Gurion instantly slapped his hand away and roared, Don't touch me, you worthless trash! His exploding rage twisted Gurion's face into a terrifying mask. Gritting his teeth in pure hatred, he spat, Did he say he wants to overthrow the Elmhams, that branch family trash, if I let him keep running wild? I won't have the face to look at the main family ever again. Staring at his blood-stained hand, he nursed a mad desire for revenge. I am nothing like my brother. I absolutely cannot let things end like this. Just then a cold voice echoed, What is the matter, Elmham? We haven't seen each other in a while, and yet you look absolutely pathetic. Gurion looked up in shock, only to realize Nolan was standing tall right in front of him. Clinging to him like a lifeline, Gurion shrieked in frustration, Where the hell have you been all this time? Wasn't dealing with him supposed to be your job? He got beaten miserably, and yet he's still making excuses. Looks like he found himself a shield, didn't he? Staring at Nolan's dependable back, Gurion silently gloated. That's right. We still have this guy on our side. Even though his insignia isn't seven-winged when it comes to swordsmanship, he's without a doubt the strongest guy here. He frantically pointed at Aster and screamed for Nolan to chop him to pieces, but Nolan just kept a blank face and casually said, I'm here to return this. He coldly announced he was cutting ties with such a despicable coward. Sure enough, your methods go completely against my code of chivalry. Consider our alliance dead as of today. Nolan turned on his heel and walked away, leaving Gurion utterly stunned. This sudden change of heart from the House of Nolan threw the remaining candidates into absolute chaos. They felt lost and isolated on the battlefield, not knowing who to trust or follow. Coldly stepping toward Aster, Nolan firmly declared that there was no room for running away in this exam. In this exam, don't tell me you actually thought you could pass without settling things with me first. He wanted to use the proud swordsmanship of the House of Nolan to test his true strength against Aster's seven-winged power. This guy is tough, but whether he can actually beat him is the real question. Nolan channeled all his magic power into his sword, creating a bright golden glow and charged with terrifying speed. He roared with determination, let's settle this right now, and see who is truly stronger. In stark contrast to his urgency, Aster only smirked and gave a mysterious reply, no, let's save that for later. Instantly, a surge of crimson magic erupted, and Aster easily blocked Nolan's thunderous strike, creating a powerful collision. Nolan was shocked to realize that Aster was completely different from the guy he had just faced moments ago. It was a suffocating, overwhelming power. This guy, he's completely different from before. Refusing to accept any delay, Nolan reminded Aster of the Academy's brutal rules stating that only one team is allowed to pass this exam. He roared, demanding an immediate fair duel to decide who was truly fit to become a royal knight. Aster calmly closed his eyes, admitting that would indeed be a major problem for him if he had to eliminate someone so talented. He left Nolan absolutely speechless with shock when he loudly declared, Nolan, I want you to become a royal knight too. Aster explained that after rallying everyone to defeat the Elmham family, letting an ally drop out just because they were on different teams would be terrible. With a confident and calculating smile, Aster firmly asserted, I already have a plan to get everyone here to pass. Well, passing would be awesome. Why bother wearing ourselves out competing? Ha ha. Nolan and the other candidates stood there dumbfounded, unable to believe their ears at the crazy idea Aster had just blurted out. Standing amid the ruins, Aster asserted that while he wasn't completely sure, he was fairly confident, as long as everyone cooperated. Looking down at Gurion, who was kneeling miserably, he began his first step to turn the tide. Aster reached his hand out in front of the very guy who wanted to kill him moments ago and coldly said, Let's make peace, Gurion. Right after that, an unprecedented sight unfolded at Outpost 3. The three sashes representing the blue, red, and yellow teams were tied tightly together and fluttered side by side atop the tower. Witnessing this bizarre sight, the examiner roared in anger, accusing these candidates of not even knowing how to plant the flags according to the rules. Aster calmly explained that the rules only required capturing 2 or more bases, but there was never any rule forbidding multiple teams from planting their flags at the same main outpost. Therefore, all 3 teams decided to form an alliance to capture all the bases together. He had successfully found a loophole. This must have made the examiner absolutely fuming. Livid with rage, the examiner bellowed that Aster was making a mockery of the exam, demanding to know if he intended to hold hands with the enemy instead of crushing them in accordance with the true spirit of knighthood. He roared about the ideal that a knight must be the sword of the nation and threatened to fail every single candidate here for this ridiculous stunt. Unfazed Aster challenged him, asking if he was abusing his authority to fail candidates who hadn't broken a single rule. He stepped closer and whispered a heavy warning into the examiner's ear. If everyone was failed, this way would the main Elmham family just sit idly by? When they see their own people disqualified so unfairly, the threat struck a nerve, leaving the examiner speechless in absolute frustration. The entire group was then escorted to a closed room where they had to wait standing for one incredibly tense hour. Smith paced anxiously, terrified they would all end up failing for some stupid reason after the wild stunt they just pulled. In contrast to his teammates' anxiety, Aster remained calm. He figured that at least this action showed them that this matter was actually worth discussing. Besides, if they failed everyone, who would the instructors even teach? Seeing that Gurion had finally agreed to cooperate, Smith curiously asked Aster what he had said to tame that arrogant young master. But he only got a mysterious smile in response. Suddenly, the large doors swung open and a knight loudly called for everyone's attention as Headmaster Mimia was about to announce the exam results. An elderly man with a commanding presence stepped in, demanding that everyone listen carefully to what he was about to say. Observing the middle-aged man walking closer, Aster wondered to himself, "Is that the headmaster?" Noting his somewhat simple appearance, Aster casually thought, "He just looks like any other old man. Pretty ordinary, right?" His disrespectful remark was immediately scolded by the person next to him for being way too rude. Mimia stopped in his tracks, stared straight at Aster, and asked, "You are Aster?" "Correct." He admitted that because of Aster's stunt, the council had been forced to make an extremely difficult decision as accepting so many candidates. At the same time, like this was completely unprecedented. Mimia revealed that there was initially a proposal to hold a retake, but thanks to the support of other academy directors, finally deciding to accept Aster's reasoning and ignoring the doubtful look on the young man's face that seemed to ask what that even meant, Mimia suddenly flashed a bright smile and confidently declared, "All of you have passed. This was hands down some of the best news for a student's life like ours, ha ha." Immediately, the entire room erupted into cheers of pure joy. Smith and the other candidates couldn't hide their happiness upon learning they had officially become academy students. Mimia reminded everyone to keep putting in even more effort to prove that the academy's decision today was not a mistake. He solemnly offered his congratulations and warmly welcomed all the new recruits to the Knight Academy of the Dorison Kingdom. A collective shout of sheer relief echoed through the night, marking a fresh start for Aster's journey here. Having pulled off a miracle in the entrance exam, Aster, along with the other candidates, enjoyed a rare moment of relaxation in the Academy's massive hot springs. Soaking in the water, Smith cheered in pure bliss. "Man, now this is the life. The food is amazing, the bath is huge, and we owe it all to Master Aster." The other candidates chimed in with excitement, some even declaring they would follow Boss Aster for the rest of their lives. Meanwhile, Aster just quietly enjoyed the warm water, thinking to himself that the most important thing was that they actually dared to stand up against the Elmham family and officially became knight candidates. He believed that this momentum would sooner or later turn into a massive tide that would overthrow the entire Elmham clan, and this place would be the starting point of his rebellion. Aster didn't forget to think of his older sister Onfin, who had enrolled 1 year before him, and would surely be a powerful ally in helping him understand the inner workings of this place. Before official training kicked off tomorrow, just as he was about to get up to prepare for his new life at the academy, Aster suddenly sensed something unusual, right behind his back. He turned around in shock and gasped in panic when he saw the crowd of candidates gathered together, staring intently at the crest on his back with worshipful eyes. "Hey, what on earth are you guys doing?" As it turned out, this crowd believed that a living 7-pointed crest was an incredibly powerful good luck charm, so they were crowding around him to leech some of his good fortune. "We're actually pretty concerned about this, too." Ignoring Aster's rage and resistance, the candidates kept kneeling and sincerely clasping their hands in prayer, begging the gods for blessings. Aster could only roar in absolute helplessness at the ridiculous actions of his new comrades, insisting that such lucky things would never happen. Meanwhile, in a dark corner of the castle, a mysterious woman, Sho, stood on the balcony, coldly expressing her disappointment to Gryan, who was kneeling at her feet. She mocked him, saying that instead of taking down the 7-pointed child, he allowed himself to be subdued and return empty-handed in a pathetic manner. Helen Elmham glared down at Gryan kneeling at her feet, her voice dripping with rage as she growled, "I heard you even let him declare that he will crush the Elmhams you stood by and watched while taking such humiliation." Gryan trembled, begging in fear. "I am so sorry, Mother. I will definitely make up for this mistake. Next time I will meet your expectations, Mother." But a brutal kick cut him off. Helen coldly declared, "There won't be a next time for a piece of trash like you. They say even a vicious tiger won't eat its own cubs, right? But this woman must be a demon in human skin." She continued her bitter insults. "A useless and filthy piece of trash like you is better off being chopped up with the offal at the slaughterhouse and fed to the magic beasts." Right then, Liliana Elmham appeared. She casually walked over, stomped on her dying brother, and sneered, "Just like that weakling Dallas." Gryan groaned in agony, trying to cling to the last shred of hope. "Ugh, please, I'll do anything, sister, just not that." However, his plea was met with nothing but merciless kicks from his own sister. Sprawled on the ground, his face covered in blood, Gryan gnashed his teeth in despair and burning hatred. Damn it, it's all his fault! It's all because of him! He blamed everything on Aster, the one who had dragged him into this nightmare. Suddenly, Aster's calculated offer during the exam flashed in his mind. Work with me, Gryan.
It would look really bad if you went back empty-handed like this.
Wouldn't it? Just as Aster had predicted, Gryan was now treated as worse than a dirty rag in his own household. Seeing Gryan's bewildered face, Aster had mocked the scenario of him reporting to his family that he got outsmarted by a piece of trash from a branch family and failed the exam. Leaning close to his ear, with threatening, glowing eyes, Aster whispered, "Just imagine if that reached the ears of the main house's great elder. You'd definitely be executed right." Staring at Gryan's face, pale with sheer terror, Aster rubbed salt in his deep fear. "I've already seen how Dallas ended up. How pathetic. That's no way for a human being to die." Aster firmly grabbed Gryan's collar, forcing him to face the brutal reality waiting ahead. Aster coldly instilled dread into Gryan's mind. "You don't want to end up like him, do you? All you need to do is keep your mouth shut and ignore everything I do. If you do that, I'll save you." Back in reality, Liliana was still relentlessly raining down brutal kicks on Gryan until a voice called out to stop her. "Let him go, Lily, that's enough!" The one who spoke was Julius A. Elmham. He sat there casually mocking. "Your cute little brother is crying and apologizing, see? Right, Gryan?" All Gryan could do now was sob in agonizing pain, groaning, "Ugh, brother!" Julius smirked arrogantly, his hand squeezing the head of Anfan, who was currently restrained in an iron mask as he continued with his hypocritical words. "We are family bound by blood, and family members should get along, don't you think, Anfin? This absolute dominance of the Elmham clan, which had been used to suppress the knights for so long, was starting to tremble violently ever since the appearance of the seven-pointed crest. Standing before the clan's symbol of ultimate authority, Lady Helen coldly turned around. Her eyes gleamed with malice as she issued a stern order to her two children. "So you two must remind them." Liliana flashed a twisted, bloodthirsty smile. Her purple eyes glowed with excitement. "That we aren't just here for show." Joining his sister, Julius let out a sinister grin, his crimson eyes burning with murderous intent. He loudly declared his brutal objective: "Let's show them what real violence looks like. You are the prestigious royal knights, or rather the candidates chosen for that role." Amidst the training ground lined with towering pillars, crowds of candidates were training relentlessly, searching for a chance to change their lives. A true royal knight is a member of the elite who completely overwhelms everyone else in battle. Of course, when it comes to strategy and every other field, if you crave to join their ranks, you must prove you are someone truly special. And as for being special, there is only one winner. So give it your all, everyone. Smith roared with determination, but the moment his sword struck the pillar, it shattered into tiny pieces. He stood there in utter shock, muttering, "Damn it!" To assess talent, the Academy divides candidates into 6 ranks, matching them with a curriculum suited to their actual strength. Those who are stronger get access to more advanced and higher-level techniques. If you can only swing a sword, you are merely rank 3. Only when you can control magic will you be considered rank 2. Only by mastering both swordsmanship and magic can candidates officially join the ranks of rank 1. A blazing red aura suddenly enveloped the space, accompanied by a booming declaration. "I have nothing to teach mediocre fools below rank 3. If you want to learn rank 1 techniques, get stronger and prove your worth. That is the only freedom you are allowed here." With a thunderous crash, the examiner turned his head in shock. Aster stood tall, sword in hand. It turned out he had just sliced through the pillar like butter. The candidates behind him could only groan in despair. How are we supposed to do that? High up on the balcony, the Academy directors watched in awe, their eyes fixed on the youth They secretly wondered if someone with such extraordinary talent could be one of the rumored 7 wings. Easily destroying a magic iron pillar, a material as tough as a golem, proved beyond a doubt that Aster was truly special. However, the potential hidden within the 7 wings didn't stop there. One director thoughtfully noted that if Aster became complacent, he would surely be swallowed up by the hidden dragon, Julius Elmheim, who sat arrogantly with a sinister smirk, ready to crush anyone in his way with brutal power. Standing by the corridor window, Smith sighed as he looked at the score rankings. Even though they had passed the rigorous selection exam, they were still facing the harsh trials of a true meritocracy. Looking at the card in his hand, Smith bitterly realized that among the recruits, Aster and Nolan were the only ones who didn't start from the lowly rank 6. The gap in class was immediately obvious when Aster was placed in rank 4 while the others were still struggling far behind. Holding his rank 4 card, Aster gave a bright smile and reminded his teammate that to become a Royal Knight, they had to reach at least rank 2. He urged Smith to catch up quickly if he didn't want to end up in big trouble. Smith complained about how strict his boss was, leaving Aster completely bewildered. Boss, Smith seriously recalled Aster's declaration of war to crush the Elmheim family, which had sparked hope in so many people for a real change in their current reality. He excitedly threw an arm around Aster's shoulder and proudly declared, "So let us back you up, boss. Let's take down Elmheim together. You're a big deal in the academy now, boss, hey. Aster resolved to become even stronger to achieve his sole goal, crushing the Elmheim family. While he was lost in thought, his growling stomach suddenly pulled him back to reality. Smith grabbed his arm to go look for food. "First, we gotta get some food. I won't survive the afternoon practice on an empty stomach." The moment they reached the hall, they were surprised to see a crowd of anxious recruits gathered. Aster wondered, "What's going on? Why is everyone standing around here?" Seeing Aster arrive, the panicked recruits cried out, "Ah, Aster is here. We've got big trouble, man. The Elmheim family is here." A strange, sarcastic voice called out from inside, "Oh, so you're Aster!" A young man casually munching on bread looked at Aster with a challenging gaze. "Since you took so long to get here, I went ahead and started enjoying this batch first." Aster stood frozen in shock as he realized Julius and Lillian were sitting arrogantly up ahead, while Julius was casually stepping on a poor soul lying flat on the ground. Smith asked in shock, "His siblings? So that means he's also from the main family?" Aster confirmed in a low voice. "Yeah, they're like ants, there are tons of them. That is Julius Elmheim, the second son and second in line of succession to the main family along with his younger sister Lillian. This tyrannical duo is known as the most savage, and cruel in the entire Elmheim family. Wherever they go, they leave only destruction behind, willing to ruthlessly crush anyone in their way without a second thought, instilling terror in anyone who opposes them." Aster thought to himself that he had completely forgotten about the presence of these two dangerous individuals at the academy. Lillian looked at Aster with an amused gaze. "Hey, you've got a pretty cute face." She casually stepped over the groaning body on the ground and sneered, "So unlike this dumb, ugly, boring little brother lying here." Seeing the strange iron mask on the defeated boy's face, Smith asked in horror, "What's up with that creepy mask?" Aster coldly explained, "That's the iron shackle, a disciplinary tool of the Elmheim family used to punish those who fall behind. In his past life, he had been a victim of their torture too." Julius smirked, stepping heavily on Gryan's head as he insulted him. Even with the Elmheim name, he still got dumped into the lowly rank 6 in today's classification. Julius looked down at his groaning brother, his lips curling in disdain. "Pathetic, isn't it?" He flashed a sickening smile, claiming that this iron mask was a gift from a caring older brother, meant to give Gryan some motivation to try harder. Aster looked at the long line of students wearing that terrifying disciplinary device. Julius casually revealed his sheer cruelty. "If food, water, and fresh air are the rewards, anyone will work themselves to death, because if they can't take it off, they'll die." Witnessing the horrifying scene, Smith shuddered in fear. "What the hell is going on here? Are they all wearing that thing?" Julius pointed triumphantly at the shackled students, claiming that their fierce, hungry beast-like glazes were proof of the mask's effectiveness. He casually demanded the recruits to greet their seniors properly. Suddenly, Julius turned to a figure standing behind him and urged, "Come on, you too. Don't be shy. Let everyone see your face." He gave a sinister laugh as a red-haired girl stepped forward. "It's been a while since you two reunited, hasn't it?" Aster froze, his pupils constricting, as he realized the person standing in front of him wearing the cold iron mask was his sister. Julius asked with glee, "Well, what do you think? Your sister has changed quite a bit, hasn't she?" Aster screamed in agonizing despair. "Sister! Alfina!" Oh my God, they even dragged his sister here to use her as a plaything for their sick games. He watched Alfina tremble, her eyes filled with resentment. Behind the iron mask, the fire of rage inside Aster erupted more violently than ever. His hand gripped the hilt of his sword, radiating a terrifying aura as he roared in absolute fury. "You Julius, you bastard, what did you do to her?" Faced with that rage, Julius casually tossed another iron mask. Down onto the floor, the sharp, dry clatter of metal rang out provocatively. Julius sneered calmly, "Calm down." He nonchalantly announced that he had prepared more than enough masks for every single newcomer. Looking at the iron masks scattered all over the floor under his feet, Julius stood arrogantly, stepping on Gryan's body, and spread his arms wide. He wore a twisted, ecstatic smile and declared loudly, "Let's enjoy a fun welcome party!" Julius yelled, ordering his lackeys. "All right, you bastards, put your back into recruiting. These guys are your juniors in the death squad." He grinned maniacally and declared, "If you want a decent dinner, make sure every single one of these recruits wears a mask. Bring them on." Immediately, the masked seniors launched a frenzied attack, making Aster realize how dire the situation was. Their eyes were completely hollow, having lost all sanity. With the skills of at least rank 4 students, this relentless onslaught took Aster by surprise, catching him off guard by the Elmham family making their move so early. In a battle that was completely unfair in terms of numbers, they've decided to go for a preemptive strike on him. If they hesitated, they'd all go down together. Seeing their comrades fall one by one, Smith screamed in a panic, "What do we do, boss? At this rate, we're all going to be turned into those masked puppets." Faced with this critical situation, Aster decisively swung his glowing red sword, unleashing a burst of magical energy that blew back all the closing-in seniors in the blink of an eye. Painful groans echo as the masked crowd is blown away, revealing Aster's murderous glare locked onto the mastermind. Smith can't help but be shocked by the terrifying pressure that Aster is radiating right now. Aster takes a step forward, looking straight at the ringleader, and growls, "Cousin Julius, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Julius casually replies with a sarcastic tone, telling Aster not to be so harsh. He claims this is an act of kindness on his part while contemptuously calling the rookies following Aster mere trash. He sneers at those who only ride coattails to pass the exam, delusional about their candidate status, while he sits arrogantly on a high seat next to Lillian. Julius declares that if the quality of those at the bottom is too low, even those at the top like him will be dragged down. Gosh, these people are unbelievably arrogant. Acting like they own the world, this is totally out of line, guys. As the leader, he claims he cannot allow such half-heartedness to exist and decides to personally take care of everyone Elmham style. Holding an iron mask with a twisted, cruel smile, Julius stomps his foot hard on the head of a groaning student on the ground while uttering those arrogant words. Aster only coldly replies that he didn't ask, nor does he care about anything Julius just said. He roars in fury, demanding Julius to remove that disgusting thing from his sister's mouth immediately. He channels glowing red mana into his sword and lunges at Julius, but is suddenly blocked by Alphen's own blade. Seeing his sister protecting the enemy, Aster is shocked, unable to believe his eyes. Alphen stares at her brother with cold, lifeless eyes behind her iron mask while Julius stands casually behind her. He sneers, telling Aster not to take his anger out on him, claiming Alphen is by his side completely of her own free will. He challenges Aster to ask his sister himself while Lillian giggles in amusement at her brother's cruelty. Aster painfully realizes why their mother was so worried about not hearing from Alphen for so long. It turns out she had been enduring this horrific nightmare. Determined to save her from this manipulation, he screams, "Sister, you don't have to listen to them anymore." But his good intentions are met with a brutal, merciless slash from Alphen. As Aster hesitates, Nolan suddenly rushes in, shouting, "What are you waiting for?" He declares that if Aster can't bring himself to strike, he will end that bastard Julius himself. Nolan charges straight at the leader, despising Julius's lack of honor, and demands he draw his sword to taste the techniques of Nolan's family, something that will be carved deep into his soul. But Julius is on a completely different level, catching the blade with his bare hands. He mocks with utter contempt. So, someone who trains with a sword harder than others is considered a great knight? Nolan shockingly feels the terrifying pressure radiating from him. The fiery mana surrounding Julius suffocates Nolan with its intense heat. Is this mana actually radiating heat? Julius laughs arrogantly, declaring the philosophy of the strong, only the strongest matters. Instantly, he delivers a devastating kick, sending Nolan flying, crashing down in agonizing pain. Seeing his teammate in danger, Smith rushes over in a panic. "Hey, are you okay?" Nolan groans. "It hurts like hell, of course. What a stupid question." Julius watches this pathetic sight with smug satisfaction, admitting he loves trampling on the pride and dignity of those who act so noble. Lillian casually steps forward with an iron mask, her face twisting into a sick smile as she decides to turn Nolan into her own special pet. She contemptuously brushes Smith aside, coldly declaring, "Weakness is a sin, you know." Julius chimes in with glee, asserting that only the strong have the right to speak. Meanwhile, chaos erupts around them as other students are forced to wear iron masks one after another, amid desperate screams of, "Save me, stop, and get away from me." Julius glares at Aster, challenging him on where his future will go when everything is devoured by the strong. Aster remains silent, his eyes glowing with a deadly glare. Julius smirks, mocking. "Well, what's it gonna be, cousin?" Instantly, Aster roars and charges like a blazing red whirlwind, a world-shattering magical collision exploding as Aster pours all his strength into a single slash. Yet he fails to pierce Julius's mana shield. No matter how hard he tries, it just won't break. Julius quickly grabs him by the neck, the searing heat making Aster groan in agony. Shocked by his leader's struggle, Smith can only call out Aster's name in panic. Yet Julius maintains his arrogant smirk, spitting out contemptuous words. "Is this all you've got? How disappointing. I expected you to be a lot more useful than this." He sneers that Aster only managed to block a single attack and shouldn't get cocky. In response, Aster's eyes glow fiercely through the flames as he suddenly spins around, unleashing a powerful roaring vortex of red mana. Julius is shocked to notice something bizarre. His own mana is being swept up and redirected at his opponent's will. The compressed mana violently explodes, blasting Julius back and shattering the solid stone walls into 100 pieces. Amidst the dust and rubble, Aster calmly sheathes his sword and coldly retorts, "Were you babbling about something earlier? Sorry I wasn't listening. Guess you're finally quiet now, huh, guys?" He was buzzing around like an annoying wasp. Hehe. He steps up to his defeated foe, his sword still radiating a threatening aura. Standing over the pathetic, beaten Julius, Aster growls, "Why don't you say those words again, dear cousin? Remembering the insult about how trash." I should know how to shut their mouths. Aster glares directly into his eyes, his gaze burning, and asks, "Isn't that exactly what you said?" Looking at the ruined wreckage, the onlookers are completely stunned, gasping in disbelief. Did that guy actually pull it off? Amidst the wreckage, Aster stands there in silence. Well, that is exactly what you get for boasting too early. Aster's gaze remains completely unwavering as Julius struggles to push himself up, dusting himself off and grumbling in annoyance. "Ugh, that hurt like hell. That hurt. You really blasted me quite a distance, didn't you, cousin? You're a fearless little punk, aren't you? What are you going to do if you scratch my precious crest, huh?" Everyone is left stunned, witnessing Julius still standing strong after such a devastating attack. Smith trembled, unable to believe his eyes. "What? Is he completely unharmed?" In contrast to the terrified crowd, Lillian looked absolutely thrilled. "Oh, we're in for a treat now. My brother's finally getting heated up." She didn't hesitate to mock her brother bitterly. "You're so pathetic, brother. You talked so big only to get countered this miserably." Julius kept a smug smirk on his face as he casually replied to his sister's teasing. "Hey, don't be so blunt, Lily. Even a guy like me has feelings, you know." "You know." He quietly looked down at the shattered sword at his feet. A murderous aura began to rise again as he delivered a chilling threat directly to Aster. "You've got a lot of nerve doing that." Julius roared in anger, his pride deeply wounded. "How dare you call me trash, Aster?" He unleashed a raging torrent of magic as if to incinerate everything around him. Looking at the calm Aster, Julius gritted his teeth and sneered, "You've really grown too arrogant, just because I played along with your little family game." He growled threateningly. "I hope you're ready to face death!" Julius screamed and lunged forward in a frenzy, but Aster remained completely unfazed. Swinging his glowing red sword, he retorted coldly, "Oh, really cut the long-winded threats. If you're coming, then just bring it on." Julius poured all his strength into a massive flaming slash, determined to crush his opponent. Aster swiftly dodged his eyes, calmly tracking his enemy's every move. Just as the two of them were about to clash with their final blows, a powerful voice suddenly intervened.
"That's enough, you two."
Aster gasped, recognizing the familiar presence. This voice... Count Mace appeared looking elegant with a relaxed smile on his face. He glanced at the surrounding debris and sighed softly. "What do you all think a cafeteria is for? It's quite a headache when you keep causing a ruckus like this. Goodness, you've turned this place into an absolute war zone." Count Mace walked over casually. He couldn't just stand by and watch this destruction anymore. Julius roared in anger, telling Mace to stay out of this. He contemptuously called him a mere lackey of the sixth head of the family, with no right to interfere in his business. Mace kept his relaxed smile, advising Julius to calm down. He pointed out sarcastically that for a top-tier student and a candidate for the top spot to lose his temper over someone considered a lower class was truly disgraceful. To de-escalate the situation, Mace stepped closer to Aster and gently asked him to sheath his sword as a favor to him. Julius snorted coldly, his eyes filled with resentment as he glared at Mace. He growled, claiming Mace had no idea how much trouble he was causing, but ultimately decided to let it go this time. Julius sheathed his sword with a sharp flick and ordered his henchmen to withdraw, declaring that the welcoming party was over. Seeing his enemy about to leave while his sister Alphen's situation was still unresolved, Aster prepared to charge after him, shouting, Wait, I'm not done with you yet. However, Mace quickly closed the distance and held Aster back, stopping his reckless move. Squeezing Aster's shoulder, Count Mace advised him in a soft voice, "I'm sorry, but I would be very grateful if you could let this go for my sake this time." Though burning with rage, Aster could only stand frozen helplessly watching his sister Alphen walk away dejectedly behind the tyrant Julius. In his heart, he screamed in agony, "Sister." Alphen turned her head slightly. Her dull, lifeless eyes behind the iron mask seemed to hold 1,000 words she couldn't say. Aster stood frozen watching her go. His heart felt squeezed, seeing his sister completely manipulated by the enemy's shackles. At his feet, the cold iron mask lay abandoned on the ground, a stark testament to the humiliation his sister was enduring.
Sister Alphen.
Aster silently called her name in sheer anguish. The scene shifted to the office, where Viscount Highfield was slamming the desk in anger. Damn it! Witnessing the Maine family's tyrannical behavior right inside the academy, even a seasoned man like him could not hide his helplessness and fury. Smee couldn't help but shudder recalling the horrific scene. That Julius is an absolute monster! Nolan, the genius of the Nolan family, now lay comatose, his entire body wrapped in thick white bandages after his crushing defeat. Not only that, but many other comrades had also been mocked by Lillian and dragged away in those grotesque iron masks. Looking at Aster, who was gripping the iron mask tightly with eyes full of murderous intent, Smith asked anxiously, "What do we do next, boss?" Aster stood tall, his hand squeezing the cold iron mask. His gaze locked onto the man sitting leisurely before him, and he questioned him in a low, resentful voice. "You should have stopped them, Count Mace." The silence in the room was shattered by the angry shout of the female assistant standing behind. "Hey, watch your tone with the Count. He's the one who just stepped in to save you." But Mace casually raised his hand to calm her down, his signature polite smile still on his face. It's fine. This boy and I are old acquaintances. Isn't that right?" Aster stared at Mace's unbothered face. Memories of 4 years ago when he was summoned to the Elmham Maine family came rushing back. Back then, amidst the suffocating pressure from the great elders, Mace was the only noble from the Elmham Knights faction who had stood up to defend him. Though Mace had saved his life once, even to this day, Aster still couldn't understand this man, whether he was an ally or an enemy. Before Mace could even react, Smith, sitting right next to him, boiled over with frustration, crying out in desperation, "I don't care if they're members of the Elmham family or not, but how? How can you just stand by and watch such brutality happen right before your eyes?" Mace only responded to his rage with a smug, knowing smirk. He casually pointed out that he, too, was a high-ranking official of the Elmham family, so unless there was a truly serious problem, he would never go and question the actions of the family heads. Aster raised the iron mask, his eyes burning with anger as he demanded, "Is forcing people to wear a mask just to control them not a serious problem to you?" Mace simply leaned back in his chair, coldly stating that this academy was built to train knights based on meritocracy. He believed that no matter how brutal the methods, as long as they helped the candidates advance, he had no reason to object. Mace even mockingly pointed out that the students under Julius were seeing their scores skyrocket. Under the coddling of even the headmaster, those candidates wearing the iron masks with their soulless, glowing red eyes were slowly being turned into actual fighting machines. Aster bitterly realized he couldn't rely on anyone in this corrupt place. Seeing Aster prepared to leave, Mace read him like a book and warned, "You aren't planning to walk straight into enemy territory to bring them back, are you?" "I wouldn't advise that." Mace's eyes locked onto Aster, reminding him that his every move was being heavily monitored by the Maine family. Just one wrong step, and they could kick him out of the academy whenever they wanted. Even so, Aster kept walking with determination. He coldly asserted that threats weren't a reason for him to abandon his comrades. Looking at the iron mask in his hand, Aster told himself that his actions weren't purely out of righteousness. He knew all too well how those iron chains gnawed at and rotted away a person's soul, stripping away their freedom of speech and even the basic dignity of a warrior. In the end, it would completely destroy their will to resist, turning everyone into mindless slaves who only knew how to obey their masters, converting humans into obedient and convenient tools. And that was the true horror of those chains. Seeing Aster's face harden, Mace narrowed his eyes suspiciously. "You talk about that!" And as if you've seen it happen with your own eyes before. Aster merely smirked, a dark look flashing in his eyes as he replied, "I just happened to learn about the fate of those for whom it was already too late. I don't want my friends to end up like that." Astor's firm declaration left both Smith and Mace in silent thought. Mace stared deep into the young man's eyes, a growing doubt rising in his mind. Could he mean... Sensing the heavy atmosphere, Astor lightened his tone to reassure them. Well, don't worry too much. I'm not exactly eager to get expelled either. If we can settle this peacefully, that's even better. Astor resolutely stood up, preparing to leave the office. Seeing his confident posture, Mace curiously asked after him, "Oh, so you really do have a plan?" Without looking back, Astor raised the iron mask in his hand and coldly replied, "I'm sure you know very well by now, don't you? That is my own way of fighting." Astor firmly gripped the iron mask. 3 days after the chaos in the cafeteria, the atmosphere at the academy had grown more suffocating, dull than ever. The trainees were running frantically, drenched in sweat, their faces showing sheer exhaustion under the crushing invisible pressure. Watching this, Nolan was still stubbornly heading to the training grounds, his face covered in bandages. Smith couldn't help but ask out of concern, "Hey Nolan, are you sure you're okay to train with those injuries?" Nolan brushed it off resolutely, his gaze remaining firm despite his aching body. "Now is not the time to rest. The Grade 4 curriculum is about to start. Besides, injuries like this are nothing but scratches." Smith could only sigh at his teammate's stubbornness. "You're as pig-headed as always." But Smith's eyes quickly widened in shock as he looked ahead. Actually, the one we should really be worrying about is him. He stared at Astor's retreating back, asking himself in utter terror, what on earth is going through his head? Because right now, Astor was walking proudly wearing the very iron mask the slave chains of the Elmham family locked tight onto his face. Just a few days earlier, Astor had silently marched straight into enemy territory, draped in a form-fitting black outfit. Witnessing his arrival, Julius lounged casually on a sofa, a bottle of wine in hand, and spat out a bitter, mocking sneer. "You've got a lot of nerve showing your face here again. You know, brother, I still haven't forgiven you for what happened the other day." He narrowed his eyes at Astor, demanding with pure contempt, "And yet here you are barging in to talk about making a deal. Who the hell do you think you are?" Standing in the midst of razor-sharp blades, Astor remained terrifyingly calm. Staring straight at his enemies, he boldly declared his purpose. "I am here to take my sister and my comrades back home. And to make that happen, Astor made an offer that stunned everyone. Pointing down at the iron mask on the floor, he coldly declared, "In exchange, I will let you put those iron chains on me. That is my condition." Witnessing her younger brother's reckless decision, Anfine cried out in panic in her mind, "Astor, what on earth are you thinking?" Astor continued to play right into his opponent's calculations. "You must have heard the rumors that I'm suspected of planning a rebellion, right?" He asserted that this was Julius's chance to leash a suspected traitor, a deal that wasn't bad at all for him. Hearing this, Lillian sneered mockingly. "Are you out of your mind? Are you really begging to be someone's pet? What are you, some kind of masochist?" Julius fell silent, pondering. He had to admit Astor was a massive thorn in the Elm family's side. Yet looking into those unwavering eyes, Julius couldn't help but feel suspicious. He growled, "But I don't think you're the type to just submit and obey. What the hell are you plotting?" He was met only with Astor's mysterious silence. With blades still pressed against his neck, Julius remained deeply suspicious, but Astor simply replied coldly, "Nothing." He looked down at the iron mask on the floor and asserted, "That mask is locked with magic and only you hold the key. You can kill me whenever you please." Even so, Astor's eyes suddenly grew sharp as he provoked him further. "Are you really that lacking in confidence, cousin?" The jab struck a nerve, driving Julius mad. A blazing aura of magic erupted around his body as he gritted his teeth, thinking, "This brat!" Finally, he snapped and declared, "Fine, I'll take that bet." Julius slammed his wine bottle onto the table. Since Astor was the one proposing the deal, he felt a simple trade of places was far too boring. Looking at the others in chains, he smiled cruelly. He proposed a brutal trial, not 7 days but 10 days. 10 days wearing that thing without a single drop of water or a crumb of food. If you're still breathing by then, will set all of them free. Witnessing her brother's reckless decision, Anfine could only weep helplessly behind her iron mask, crying out, "Stop it, Astor. That's impossible. You're only going to get yourself killed." Still surrounded by sharp blades, Astor knelt and coldly stated, "Then we have a deal." Astor knew better than anyone that those iron chains would slowly gnaw away and rot a person's soul. After all, he himself had been raised as a mere tool by the Elm family for a very long time. seeing his sister Amphin looking so frail inside her mask. He painfully recalled the strong, stubborn sister from his memories. Though fragile like anyone else, she had always been a resilient sister who never showed any weakness to the world. Yet here she was. She couldn't even fight back against these people. She could only gaze at him with sheer vulnerability behind that cold metal. Aster silently promised her, "Don't worry, sister. I will definitely shatter these chains. And when that time comes, we can finally talk in peace." Lillian wore a sinister smirk as the iron mask was locked onto Aster's face, causing a surge of purple magic to envelop him. Suddenly, an intimidating shout boomed from the distance. "What the hell do you think you're doing over there?" Down on the training field, the trainees wearing the iron masks were collapsed on the ground, gasping from pure exhaustion. The supervisor roared viciously, "Who gave you permission to rest?" Heavy, frustrated pants filled the air with trainees grumbling, "Damn it, why do we have to go through this?" They bitterly realized that their demonic instructor didn't care at all, forcing them to endure this agonizing punishment under the scorching sun. Smith panted in deep worry. "At this rate, we'll drop dead before Aster can even save us." Standing nearby, Nolan stared coldly down at Green, who was slumped on the ground, and sneered, "For some of us, I call that karma." Smith could only sigh, urging the others to hang in there while quietly marveling at how several days had already passed, and Aster was still acting as if nothing had happened. Watching Aster tirelessly run laps around the field, Nolan wondered if the endurance of a seven-winged child was truly on a monstrous level. After all, a normal person could only survive 3 or 4 days without food or water, at most a week, if they lay completely still like a cocoon to conserve energy. Yet Aster hadn't just starved himself. He had filled the past few days with insane, high-intensity training. He continuously swung his sword, clashing fiercely with opponents, and even when carrying heavy logs on his shoulders to cross rushing torrents, he showed absolutely no signs of exhaustion. Nolan muttered to himself, "This guy is a freaking monster. He's not even human." A bizarre rumor began circulating among the trainees about his past. They whispered that before the Viscount adopted him, that seven-winged child had crawled for miles alone through a snowy night. As a mere infant, the baby had supposedly crossed an entire snow-covered mountain range in the middle of a raging blizzard. Smith shuddered, thinking, if that's true, and isn't his will to live simply superhuman? Still deep down, he suspected it was nothing but a cheap bluff to show off. Amidst the suffocating smoke and pressure, Aster strode forward imposingly, his eyes blazing. Along with a crimson aura of magic enveloping his body, "It's time to feed, you filthy rats!" Lillian strode haughtily down the dark corridor, followed by guards carrying meager trays of food as she snapped her fingers with a flash of deep purple magic. She ordered dinner to begin, her face filled with contempt for those bound in heavy iron chains. What they called food was actually nothing more than a scrap of cheese, dry and stale, along with a glass of plain water on a chipped plate. Witnessing this pathetic ration, Ryan completely broke down, whimpering in utter despair. "Not again! Why is this all we get? I can't take this anymore. At this rate, I'm going to die." Another prisoner, trembling as they fell to their knees at her feet, begged, "Please, lady, give me some real food, please." But the only response to that desperate plea was Lillian's ruthless stomp, crushing the scrap of cheese right into the filthy floor. She smirked with pure malice. "Oh dear. If you didn't want to eat, you should have just said so from the start." Lillian casually reminded them that they shouldn't let food go to waste like that. She glanced toward a dark corner of the room and sneered, "Unlike you vermin, there's a boy out there suffering through something far, far worse." In the distance, Aster sat slumped against the wall, his body locked tight in an iron mask, seemingly exhausted after days of starving himself to buy freedom for his comrades. Looking at that scene, "Your precious little brother is quite the saint, isn't he?" Julius casually enjoyed his steak, glancing at the dazed Anfin as he mocked her. "Why don't you go over there and cheer him on, Anfin?" He sneered at her helplessness. "Oh, but then again, I guess you don't have the face to look at him. After all, he ended up in this pathetic state entirely because of you." Anfin could only grit her teeth in sheer torment, silently calling out her brother Aster's name. Looking at the lavish tray of food placed right in front of her, her throat tightened with bitterness. While Aster was enduring starvation and the torment of chains, just to buy everyone's freedom here, she sat being fed by the enemy. Trembling in utter helplessness, Anfin asked herself, What am I supposed to do now?" Chewing his meat, Julius squinted at the motionless, slumped figure of Aster in the distance, a seed of doubt sprouting in his mind. But what on earth is really going on here? I was so sure he'd have some sort of scheme or trick to escape this, and yet this whole time he hasn't shown even a shred of resistance. Staring at the solitary figure of his cousin Julius, wondered if Aster really intended to endure this for 10 whole days using nothing but his mortal body. He flashed a twisted, ecstatic grin, determined to savor every single second of this torment. He wanted to see how long the pride of the 7 sins could hold out against the brutal agony of hunger. But just as Julius was at his most triumphant behind that cold iron mask, Aster's eyes suddenly flared with a mysterious glint. "Just you wait,"